Minato Namikaze was and still is considered one of the greatest Hokage of all time, and perhaps the most popular character in the series. The Narutop99 poll has declared him the winner, making him the most popular character in Naruto currently, even if most people voted for him merely to see more of him in the spin-off manga that Kishimoto has promised. So in honor of this, we've decided to dive into this possibility again by seeing what would have changed if Naruto could have been trained by Minato, if Minato had still been alive during the course of the series. Strap on your forehead protectors and grab your kunai. We're going to witness the return of the Leaf's yellow flash. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. We've noticed that a lot of our viewers aren't actually subscribed to our channel, so if you want to get the latest videos as soon as possible, and if you really want to help us out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. The air was cold. The wind was blowing. The night had gone from tumultuous to an eerie calm in a matter of moments. Or was it hours? Time had ceased to hold any meaning for Minato Namikaze. All he knew was that the cold touch of Kushina's cheek against his arm was like liquid nitrogen to his soul, freezing it over in a solid block of ice. There was a ringing sound in his ears. The tailed beast bomb from earlier, as well as his own mental state, had seemed to leave him partly deaf. He saw Shinobi rushing in, Hiruzen rushing in. The former Hokage stopped before him, kneeling down to his level, grabbing his shoulders. "Minato! Minato!" he called out, as if there was nothing more than static over the radio. Hard to hear, harder to understand. Hiruzen shook him. "Minato!" The glazed eyes of the fourth Hokage blinked once and then looked to the man he had succeeded. "Are you okay?" Hiruzen called out. The answer was a blunt and resounding no. Physically, he was okay, but mentally, spiritually, he felt like a ghost. A shadow of himself left behind. The village was saved, but his entire world had come crashing down at once. For him, it was as if he were living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a wasteland covered in flowers and fresh water, none of which held the same meaning that they used to. He tried to think back on the events that led him to this moment. What was it that had brought this on? Why was he where he was now? It was as if he were having some form of selective amnesia, likely caused by whatever traumatic event left the lifeless body of Kushina in his arms. The only way to recover was to relive what had happened to him and reach some sort of closure. Closing his eyes, he began to remember. He was in an old stronghold, protected by Anbu. Various nurses, and even Biwako Sarutobi, Hiruzen's wife, was there. Kushina's water had broken. Minato was about to call it a night at the office when word came that Kushina was going into labor. He would rush to his home where Hiruzen had already sent armed guards. They loaded her up into a palanquin. Traditionally, every Hokage possessed one, but they were rarely used as the term Hokage was more akin to a verb than a noun. However, this was one of those rare occasions that they came in handy. They began to make their way to the stronghold under cover of night. Upon reaching the location they were headed for, they helped her out and led her deeper into the stronghold. It was like a maze. There were secret rooms and dead ends everywhere, and beyond this there were traps. Most were not active currently. That's why this was the perfect place for her to give birth. It was away from the village to minimize risk should the beast escape, and the tangled web of corridors and passages was enough to confuse and possibly kill any insurgents who would do her harm. Minato could think of no safer location for his wife to bring new life into the world, their precious child. Bringing her into the room where she would give birth, they prepared her for labor. They laid her down on a flat stone slab. It was cold and comfortable. Minato by this time was already a nervous wreck. A warrior in the battlefield and a shinobi without peer, and his face was already devoid of all color. He began to make use of his excess gear though. Folding the flak jacket he wore, he wrapped it in the Hokage Haori, the symbols depicting the number 4 clearly visible. Suddenly he felt panic well up in his solar plexus, radiating out across his entire body, shaking at the kanji. The word for the number 4 was also shared with the word for death. For so many it was an omen, and so many people attempted to avoid the number 4. Minato was not one of those people. To him, a number was just a number. But at the same time, today he didn't want to take any chances. He unfolded the Haori and turned it inside out, refolding it over as Biwako prodded him to get a move on. She was going to have a baby any moment here and he was just standing around. He was surprised to hear how quickly she was going. "She's already starting to give birth. Hurry, Minato, tend to that seal." He stuttered for a moment and then replied to her using honorifics, forgetting that he was the highest ranking member in the room. No. Maybe he wasn't the highest ranking member in the room, and he subconsciously knew that, which is why he had referred to Biwako as Sir. He came to Kushina's side, lifted her head, and wedged the makeshift pillow between it and the stone below. She took his head and looked into his eyes as he gazed back, a smile on his face. She smiled weakly as the pain was already tiring her out. "Let's do it, Minato." He nodded. He came down to her midsection and lifted her shirt, exposing her stomach as it was enlarged by the pregnancy, the seal in the very center of it already beginning to move, as if it were a false tattoo that was beginning to run with heat and sweat. It was attempting to open. He clasped his hands together and placed them over the seal. He was suddenly hit with intense hatred, as if the Ninetales were a demon attempting to possess him. He was startled for a moment. He knew the Ninetales was in his wife, and he knew that he'd felt his presence before, particularly every time she grew angry, but he'd never felt it this strongly before. Was this what she'd always felt? Such a horrible feeling. Pure malice and hatred. The way she carried herself made him believe she was immune to it, but right now, as the burden was shifted to him, he began to wonder if he could truly handle this. He shook his head and slapped his cheeks and took a deep breath. He widened his stance a little and placed his hands back on the seal. He began to pour chakra in and more Fuinjutsu formula. In order to maintain concentration, he began counting down from 1000 in increments of 7 to keep his mind sharp. This would help him focus on the task at hand and lessen the mental load that Kushina's crying and Byoko's barking would place on his mind. Within his mind, he imagined the Ninetales, as large as it was, a massive monolith. With each spell he wove, a new chain was added. Eventually, one final push pressed a massive stake right through the fox's abdomen in the same position that Kushina's seal had been placed. The stomach was known as the Sea of Chi to many, and it was where life force and chakra gathered the most and radiated out from like a furnace's flame. But limiting this furnace, he could slowly smother the Ninetales' strength before it had the chance. With one last push of his chakra, he cinched it. The Ninetales wouldn't be going anywhere now so long as he held it there. He smiled, knowing that he managed to successfully hold it at bay. Now all he had to do was hold this seal until Kushina could pick the responsibility back up. To a point, he wanted to hold this seal forever, knowing what she had to feel to hold it all in. He did not want her to feel this feeling, especially after she had just given birth. But as the child had been birthed, she sighed and looked to him. Her eyes said without words, "You can stop now." He removed his hands from her stomach and turned around to see Biwako carrying his child. He stepped forward, arms out. "Naruto." Biwako pulled the infant back in a defensive way. "Don't touch him. The mother sees him first." Startled, then disappointed, Minato just got out of the way and watched her walk away with his child. Part of him wanted to strangle her, and another part respected the fact that she cared more for Kushina, who had obviously been carrying the bigger workload of the two for the past 9 months. So he relented. The child was presented to his mother. She hugged up against him. Eventually, Minato wormed his way past Obasan and made it to their side, where he was able to finally see his baby boy for the first time. His happiness was immense, but it was this one moment. It was the only time he had ever done it since becoming Hokage. He let his guard down, just once, just for a moment, and it had cost him everything. A masked man in a dark cowl had stolen from them everything. First his child, and in exchange for the baby, he took the wife. An impossible choice, one he couldn't make without reflexes. Taking the child, Hokage Minato finally woke up again. Everyone in the room save him and the child had been killed, Kushina taken. Minato was terrified, but another part of him burned with holy rage. Utilizing Flying Raijin to teleport to his and Kushina's home over the mountains, he laid the babe down on a bed that he had hoped that all three of them would share that night. The child was sputtering and sniffing. He hated to leave him alone, but there were other things to take care of. But he would not leave his child without comfort. Even if the babe could not understand, he would say it anyway, a solemn vow to bring his mother back. He turned around and put his flak jacket on. He witnessed the marked kunai on the wall. He had left it there, not just for ease of travel, but as a reminder to his wife, to Kushina, that he would always come home no matter what. Now he was home, but he was without her. In the distance, he heard the roar of the Ninetales. The village was in trouble. With a simple movement, his Haori was on, and the husband and father he once was had been replaced with the strongest shinobi the village had produced to that point. And if that was bluster, then call him a liar. But for that one night, for his son, his wife, his village, he would make it true. He stepped out into the night and raced to his wife's side. In the darkness, Kushina was chained to stone. She lay there, the seal in her stomach laid open, black, ink-like fluid dripping from it. It was like some twisted inversion to what he had done to Kurama, and the look on her face, the look of pain, fear, and sorrow, hit him like a cement truck. He freed her. It seems whoever the adversary was, he no longer needed her. Minato would take his wife back to their home, where he would lay her in the bed beside her newborn. He had fulfilled his promise, but now he needed a new promise to fulfill. The promise to save the village and Kushina. Those two promises were won, and the stakes had been raised considerably. So too must Minato's resolve. Once more he dashed out. His adversary had the tailed beast under a contract, a genjutsu of sorts. Coming to this adversary, he pulled a kunai ready for battle. He witnessed around his arms chains like those used to restrict Kushina's movement. He was full of rage. He wanted to murder this man. He wanted to erase him from the world of the living. Even hell was too good for him. He needed to cease entirely, as if he never existed at all. Before he ran with that though, Minato took a deep breath. He had to think carefully. He witnessed the Sharingan under the mask. He knew that if this man were anything like Madara, he could control the Nine Tails with that. He needed to wrest control away from him. However, he couldn't be in two places at once. He just needed to trust that Hiruzen could hold the Nine Tails until he could stop this guy. The man spoke. "Now that I've freed the Nine Tails, your people have no hope left." They rushed at each other. Minato attempted to stab through the man, but he found himself suddenly passing through him, the man having turned intangible. Passing through, he found himself caught in the chain. The masked man pulled his arms together, hoping to sever Minato in two with the chain he was now tangled in. However, Minato used the flying Raijin jutsu to escape. Using his powers of deduction, he knew that this man would turn intangible for only a moment, as he needed to strike him. He knew that the contract he had with the Nine Tails couldn't last long, meaning that this guy wanted to end the battle as quickly as he could. He would ensure that this was the last strike of the battle. Minato rushed back again, throwing a kunai at his enemy. The kunai would pass clean through his head as Minato readied his Rasengan. Right at the last moment though, Minato would disappear, floating right above the man using his flying Raijin technique, slamming him to the ground with it, planting a marker on him. The man would disappear, cursing himself for falling for it. He watched Minato, his shoulder falling apart at a cellular level from the intense impact Minato's Rasengan had on him. You got me. This is what is meant by elusive. I should have never let my guard down. The moment he said that, a kunai was in his gut. This was the moment when Minato could utilize all of his rage. No pity existed in Minato's eyes, only steely determination, a gaze that said, "You just died, pal." He would then plant a contract seal on him to sever his connection to Kurama. "With this, the Nine Tails no longer belongs to you," he shouted. The man would manage to escape through the use of a strange space-time jutsu technique. Minato wanted to follow after and kill him, but he had no time. He needed to get to the village. Arriving there, he found the Nine Tails as it charged its attack and ready to destroy the village with a tailed beast bomb. He caught a quick glimpse of Hiruzen and grabbed onto Kurama, teleporting back to whence he came, to his family's home. There, Kushina and he faced the Nine Tails. Kushina begged him to seal it back into her and drag it to the grave with her, but he refused. He would not do that. The imbalance between world powers would start the Fourth Shinobi World War. Instead, he decided to seal it into the only one who would survive this battle, Naruto. He began to weave the signs. However, before he could, Kushina knocked him on his rear with a devastating punch. Minato had never felt anyone punch him that hard and that fast, but she did. Kushina refused. "If I'm going to die anyway, and you're hell-bent on doing this to our child, then I'll just use the Reaper. After all, who do you think taught you how to do it?" She weaved the hand signs faster than Minato could ever hope to. Perhaps it was because she was afraid he would stop her. Maybe he would. He would rather die than live in a world without her. That was the main reason he did this. The main reason why he chose to use that seal instead of any of the plethora of other seals he had. Minato wanted to die. It was planned to be heroic and glorious and look selfless, but when it boiled down to it, he chose this amongst the other options specifically because he didn't wish to live in a world where Kushina did not exist. But she had stolen that opportunity from him. The Shinigami appeared behind her, its dagger in its mouth. She began to siphon power from Kurama, reverting it to chakra and planting it into Naruto. Minato could only watch. Kurama would attempt to kill the child before she could complete the ritual, but she jumped in the way, taking this blow personally. She finished the ritual and sealed the tailed beast into Naruto. She then fell to the ground. Minato ran over and held her. For a moment, the Shinigami remained, her soul not yet devoured, a single moment of mercy from the Grim Reaper, a chance to say goodbye. He held her, his bleeding wife in his arms, as his haori, the same he had placed beneath her head, was coated red with blood. Was this a curse? Was he cursed? The curse of the fourth Hokage, Death's Hokage. She looked up at her husband, who was visibly falling apart. He looked down at her like a child whose favorite, most beloved toy had been rent to pieces. It was endearing, yet it saddened her as his tears fell down to her face, mingling with her own. She wanted to coddle him. He had always held himself together well in front of others, but only she saw it. When Obito died, she held him as he cried openly. He cried tears of joy and fear when he heard that he'd be a father. So happy, yet so terrified that he wasn't worthy, that he wouldn't be good enough. She had always seen the Minato that he would hide away from people, and now that same sad, scared little Minato was bubbling to the surface again. She raised her hand to wipe his tears. "Why did you do that?" he asked her. She smiled. "Because Naruto needs a papa. It would be selfish to rob him of both. I know what you were doing, Minato. For a moment I asked why. Why you? Why did it have to be you? And then I realized it didn't have to be you. You wanted it to be you. But that's not the hand you've been dealt. You're a father now, and Naruto comes before all else, okay? He comes before you. He comes before me. The only thing I would never ask you to sacrifice for him is the village, and even then, I would hope that such a day never comes." Tears and blood dripped from her cheeks. Her breath began to escape her. "Live, Minato. For Naruto's sake, live." She exhaled, and it seemed that along with that breath, her soul left. Looking back, he saw the Shinigami begin to swallow up a silhouette of chakra shaped like Kushina. He reached out to stop it, but his hand phased through. It then rose up into the sky, fading away in the light of the full moon. The barrier she had formed began to collapse, and Minato was left only to his thoughts. He opened his eyes in the presence, his dark reverie having come to an end, and found himself lying in a hospital bed in the emergency room, doctors and nurses standing over him. His body was beaten, bloodied, and bruised from his battle, but he could still feel them prodding at him. He sat up with a start, pushing all those around him away. The doctors made room to let him breathe. He looked down at his exposed chest to see the dried blood from lacerations and the purple around his ribs, signs of fracture. He tried to stand, but gripped his side and almost fell to the ground. He was grabbed by one of the nurses, but he pushed them away. "Naruto! Where's Naruto?" he cried out. One of the doctors that dared approached him slowly put his hand on his shoulder. "He's in the NICU. He's safe and healthy." "He has a demon! He's not safe or healthy!" he cried out. Suddenly, the room began to spin and darken as he heard staff clamoring to his side, his body light as a feather as he felt it strike the cold tile. In the darkness, he heard a voice. He heard the sound of a gentle song. He was before a lake on a picnic blanket, lying in Kushina's lap as she gently stroked the top of his head, uttering a sweet lullaby, helping her overworked husband find some rest. When he next awoke, he was lying flat in a hospital bed, an oxygen mask strapped to his face, his body covered in wires. He looked around with his one eye that wasn't swollen shut to see his heart monitor. It beeped along with his pulse, so he knew he must be alive. He looked around at the window to see light pouring in from outside. The sun was rising. He must have been out for around 5 hours. A nurse came in to check him and saw that he was awake and called for a doctor. The head doctor came in and looked at him. He pulled a small flashlight and gently opened the only eye that was capable of being opened and shined the light into it to check for dilation. He would then look to Minato. "Lord Fourth, it's a pleasure to have you back in the land of the living." Minato's voice was weak, its tone caught somewhere between a whisper and a grumble. "Naruto, Naruto." The doctor smiled reassuringly. "Your son is fine. We checked him thoroughly. It seems you protected him from any true, lasting harm. His body is healthy, his lungs certainly work, his chakra reserves are strong, and he's eating well." Minato was relieved. For a moment, he was silent. "How long have I been out? 5 hours? 6? The doctor looked to the nurse and then back to the Hokage. "You've been out for 3 days. Minato looked around. 3 days? The doctor nodded. "Yes, your body needed time to heal, and you were in a panicked state. We've had you sedated for 3 days. My apologies, but it was paramount that I ensure your safety and survival, sir. You are the Hokage." Minato gripped the mask on his face and pulled it, snapping the elastic holding it on. Hold on, sir. Don't try to..." Minato threw the mask and then began pulling off the electrodes. He sat up and felt a pain in his side. The dark purple on his ribs had faded to a pale gray with a hint of dark green. The doctor just nervously propped his head in his hand, tapping his cheek at 2 taps per second as he watched the most powerful man in the village disobey his orders to stay in bed and heal. He pulled the covers off and put his feet on the floor. Every breath had to be shallow. Anything more would be too excruciating. "Take me to my son," he said, enough power in his voice to be audible without cupped ears. The doctor didn't say anything, but the nurse did. She stuttered at first and then helped them. "Of course, right this way." She led him down the hall with a little help. If they could not stop the Hokage from moving, then the least they could do was help him move. They walked until they came to where the babies were held after the incident. To his surprise, Makoto and Itachi were there. She had Sasuke in her arms. She walked to him. "Lord Fourth, are you okay?" He nodded. "Physically, I'll live. More importantly, are Itachi and Sasuke okay?" She nodded. "Sasuke doesn't even seem to know what happened, and Itachi, he's my little hero. If he hadn't been there, we would have been crushed." Minato forced a smile. "Is that so? Huh. Maybe I got competition. Keep that up and maybe you'll make Hokage one day." He pat Itachi's shoulder as he passed by him. He looked into the room to see Naruto in a small bed equal to his size, sleeping. The nurse looked on, her gaze switching between Minato and Naruto at regular intervals. She would speak up. Would you like to see him up close, Lord Forth? Minato would nod. She would gently open the door as to not disturb the rest of the babies. She would walk him over. He's completely healthy, sir, she would tell him in a light and gentle voice. He's more healthy than you are. Minato would look at his son. He would put his finger forward and stroke Naruto's hand with it. Naruto's little hand would open and grip onto Minato's finger. Minato would gasp slowly as his eyes would sparkle a little in the presence of the most adorable thing he had ever witnessed. He wanted to hold him, to carry him, to spend every waking moment with him. Minato's thumb would begin stroking Naruto's hand that gripped Minato's index finger. He knew he wasn't strong enough to hold Naruto up. Hell, Minato was barely strong enough to hold himself up. So for now, this small token of affection was all he could offer Naruto. This is why you need to rest, sir. Not for your own sake, but for your son's. Get healthy so you can be with him. Minato would nod. After this, he began to take his rest a lot more seriously. He would return to his bed, much to the relief of the doctor. For doing this, they would allow Minato to sit up and would even open his blinds so he could look out over Konoha. As he gazed out at the village, he would note the devastation, which probably wasn't good for a man who was trying to heal both physically and emotionally, but at the same time he attempted to his best degree to see the glass half full, by recognizing how much of the village was saved, and how many lives now existed because of their sacrifices. His mind decided to use this time to be productive, thinking of new ways with which to mend the broken village. And as he did so, Hiruzen would appear bearing a vase of yellow roses. Yellow roses for the yellow flash. He had hoped that this kind gesture would get his quick friend back up to speed. Minato smiled as Hiruzen entered the room. "How are you doing, Minato?" Minato would chuckle a little. "I feel like I've been tossed into a trash compactor, but I'll be good." Hiruzen would laugh. "I'm glad to hear it." Minato would then speak. "Can you get me back up to speed with what's happening, Lord Third?" Hiruzen would stroke his chin. "I don't think such a thing is good for you, Minato." Minato would give a short laugh. "An idle mind does me no good. If I want to be better quickly, I need something to focus on." Hiruzen would nod. "You're prepared for some not-so-good news, then?" Minato would nod. "If it's news, I want to hear it." Hiruzen would nod and pull up a seat. "The Nine-Tails attack has crippled much of our infrastructure. Many of our shinobi have been wounded or killed, and it's left Konoha vulnerable. So far, no nation has moved against us, but a few are showing interest in the Nine-Tails attack, chief of which is Kumo. They've been mentioning it a lot." Minato's brows raise. Wow, news travels fast. "In this modern day and age, technology allows for one to speak to another across the planet and have a face-to-face meeting without anyone leaving the comfort of their office. Such a thing was merely a dream in my day and age. Jutsu could replicate such effects, but such abilities were difficult to learn and rarely used by anyone. The magic lantern body technique was one such jutsu, but it was hardly reliable and little more than a talking silhouette." Minato would listen to the old man prattle. He enjoyed it when Hiruzen would lose track of the conversation and just rant about the newfangled technology all the young ninja are using these days. Sad as it was, though, Minato needed to cut him off and ask for more information. "Do we have any leads on who might be behind this attack? I know for certain that this was planned. It wasn't an accident." Hiruzen would speak. "No villages or groups have claimed responsibility. There are rumors flying around, though. Some say it's the ghost of the Uchiha." Minato looked up at Hiruzen. "I knew it felt similar to what Madara had used, but I didn't believe it. Madara should be dead. There's no way he's alive." Hiruzen would disagree. "I don't know about that, Minato. I've seen many jutsu in my time, and some knock on very unethical doors. Included among these is the ability to bring the dead back to life." Minato was shocked to hear this. Bring the dead back to life? Hiruzen nodded. "The impure world reincarnation jutsu. When used with a living sacrifice, the dead can be revived in a body that never dies. You can wound it and rip it apart, but they will merely regenerate later." Minato was shocked. "How do you know of this technique?" Hiruzen himself was shocked. "How do you not? You're Hokage. The scroll of seals is in your possession. There are jutsu in there that are not meant to be remembered, but also not meant to be forgotten either. The creation of the Edo Tensei is among them." Minato was completely befuddled. He hadn't studied the scroll. Ever. Maybe now he should. "And you said that their bodies would regenerate?" Hiruzen nodded. Minato continued. "The man I fought that night. I struck him with a Rasengan and his arm seemed to melt off. Would an Edo Tensei do that?" Hiruzen thought on this. "Their bodies do display some form of decay, which only gets worse the more inexperienced the caster is with the jutsu. It is possible that their bodies could be so fragile that they would fall apart." Minato's mind was set ablaze by this. If it was true, this could be Madara Uchiha. But the true question was who the caster could be. Minato asked that much to Hiruzen. Hiruzen sat back in his chair. "That's the issue. there's a flaw in the impure world reincarnation jutsu. If the Edo Tensei manages to learn the proper hand signs, they can break control from their caster. The one who summoned them then can no longer control them, nor can they unsummon them. Their summon is left to the world in an immortal body, never-ending chakra reserves, incapable of dying. Minato was getting a bad feeling in his stomach. If this truly was Madara, then it was Madara in an indestructible body that could not be defeated. Then he remembered. I marked him. I marked the man. Hiruzen was confused. What do you mean by that? Minato, a little too excited for his own good, continued. I marked the man I fought with the flying Raijin's mark. Hiruzen sat forward. Does that mean he can be tracked? Minato nodded. If you use the sealing formula, you can teleport to any of my markers at will. He took a piece of paper and planted the formula on it. Take that. Gather the strongest shinobi you can and try to find him. Hiruzen took it and left. Heal well, Minato. Minato nodded and smiled, feeling his strength returning with the excitement. Of course, eventually he would be released. Sadly, his sealing formula had somehow been nullified by whoever had attacked the village. Minato was not sure how, but it had happened. This cemented the fact that whoever it was they were dealing with was very dangerous. Minato would also be taking a lot of time to learn to be a proper father. Whenever he wasn't doing work as Hokage, he was nose deep in parenting books. As a single father, he needed to know how to fulfill both roles of mother and father. To that end, he utilized his shadow clones to help him tend to work and Naruto at the same time. In doing so, he could further learn while working. He would also attend a meeting in which Danzo planned to move the Uchiha clan to the outskirts of the village. They, however, did not like that idea. It was clear to everyone around the table why this was proposed. It was to keep a better eye on them. And while Minato knew his adversary was an Uchiha, or at least possessed a Sharingan, he did not distrust his Uchiha brethren. After all, just because the masked man possessed a single confirmed Sharingan didn't mean that he was even Uchiha. After all, Kakashi possessed one. Many Uchiha perished in the Third Shinobi World War, and he'd be surprised if someone didn't start collecting them from the bodies. As Minato thought that, Danzo sneezes. Minato would listen to the concerns of the Uchiha as they speak, not wanting to go to the edge of the village, and so in return he decides to give them a new location, somewhere closer to the center. After all, in the center they would feel more included, and it would be easier to keep an eye on them as they would be in the middle of the public eye. The Uchiha seem to take that a bit better, and Minato promises that as soon as the damage is repaired, if they want to return to their old compound, they were free to do so. His friendship with clan head Fugaku is able to slowly quell tensions between the Leaf and Uchiha, something Danzo seems somehow a little bitter about. When the war between Konoha and Kumo breaks out, the Leaf begins to display dominance due to quick recovery under Minato's leadership. Then the Hyuga affair happens, due to Kumo's desire to acquire the Byakugan. They use a peaceful visit by their ambassadors as a ploy to kidnap Hinata Hyuga, one of the few Hyuga that do not bear the curse mark of the caged bird, a mark designed to seal the Byakugan after death or during the process of removal. Hiyashi Hyuga is forced to kill this ambassador. Due to this, Kumo demands a bloody payment or it's war. Minato, however, refuses to allow this. Instead, he tells them firmly that Kumo snuck into Konoha to kidnap a member of one of the Leaf's most prestigious clans. He says that this is an act of war, and that the debt has been paid and no further bloodshed is required, unless the 4th Raikage plans to push the envelope further. This message actually settles Kumo. War is averted, mostly because A, the 4th Raikage, along with his brother Killer B, faced Minato during the 3rd Shinobi World War, and both were nearly killed by him, which earned him respect from them, and fear. Knowing what he is capable of, they forget the matter. This would actually cause some differences as Hisashi Hyuga, father of Neji, does not need to die, and because of this, Neji's personality and childhood change quite a bit for the better. Minato sat in his office, looking over papers and forms, approving some, denying others. This was the monotonous day-to-day work he had to do. As Hokage, people looked up to him for his strength, intelligence, and wisdom, but so often he tended to use less his muscles and more his brain. The dull work he did was not like anything what he believed the Hokage's role would be. When he was younger, he thought that the Hokage spent all of his days fighting strong shinobi, gathering strength through training, and traveling on only the most dangerous and secretive of missions. Tasks so secretive that mere civilians couldn't even tell that they had been happening, let alone what they were actually about. But as it turned out, the Hokage was a paper pusher. Minato liked to keep busy. Physical tasks helped him focus on a single thing, while mental tasks such as these felt impossible as he couldn't tear his mind away from what he was thinking about. And right now, he couldn't help but feel as if his family was shattered and that it was his own fault. to be honest, Minato was tired. He barely slept since the Nine-Tails attack. The moment Naruto opened his blue eyes, they didn't shut. As an infant, he required constant attention. He cried on an hourly basis, sometimes with no break in between. And his sleep schedule was all but a tattered mess. Naruto, being a carefree baby without any responsibility, tended to sleep during the day, but at night, his wailing and need for attention really made Minato question his and Kushina's decision to have children. Not that he didn't love Naruto, but he just realized that Kushina was left vulnerable from the process, which eventually led to her demise, and now that she was gone, Minato having to raise the child himself and tend to the village, it was all so much. Minato didn't like thinking that way, but he himself was hurting, and perhaps he sought a place to put the blame. But even then, his guilty heart reminded him that Naruto could not have done anything and didn't have any reason to claim responsibility for what happened. If anything, it was Minato's fault. Minato, of course, did have nannies set up, servants in the residence who made it their job to keep the home running while Minato was running the village. They had planned to stay late at night and ensure Naruto was taken care of while Minato slept. But even with Naruto no longer his nightly responsibility, he couldn't sleep. Every night he would hear Naruto's crying, and that feeling in his chest, that fatherly instinct kicked in, convincing him when he did nothing. And even when Naruto began to sleep through the nights, Minato still couldn't sleep. He was in a rather large bed. Minato always slept on the left side, and Kushina on the right. Now that side was empty, and he couldn't bring himself to sleep in the middle as he was now capable of doing. He refused to. It brought finality to the situation, but somehow Minato still held on to hope. Hope that Kushina might still be able to live, to be somehow resurrected and brought back to him. But that's not how the world worked. The jutsu that brought the dead back to life were nothing but a myth for the inflated stories of the Sage of Six Paths. In practicality, it was impossible. One could puppet a dead body, but never revive it. If it were possible, there would be no graveyard. He would continue gazing into the ceiling, feeling the world fall away from him as he dove deeper into thought. In the morning, he would get straight to work, having still not slept. Hiruzen would be there, and he would also appear no different from Minato. Both were tired, both lost the loves of their lives to that masked man. Hiruzen was one of the few people Minato could turn to for comfort. He understood. Hiruzen had become something close to a father for Minato. Minato had lost his parents at a young age, and so all he really had in the world was his work. That was how he became as good as he was, but Hiruzen filled that role, the role of father. Despite appearances, he was really good with babies. Minato was in awe, but Hiruzen explained that he had done it before, twice. In fact, one of his sons Minato worked with often, Asama. Nonetheless, Hiruzen was here for business, not to babysit. Minato asked him what was new, and Hiruzen stated that they'd been working continuously around the clock on reverse engineering the sealing formula and managing to teleport to the masked man. But every attempt failed. They just found themselves in other places where Minato had placed markers. They could not teleport to him. Minato was confused. He stood to try for himself. He put his hands together and attempted to focus on the formula he placed on the masked man, but upon teleporting, he ended up back in the rubble of their family home. Making it back to the Hokage's office, Minato would sit and attempt to understand this. He had placed a seal on the masked man. Nobody should be able to remove that marker save Minato himself. Yet for some reason, it didn't work. This had never happened before. Curse of the Fourth, he said bluntly. Hiruzen looked up at him. Surely you don't believe that old wives' tale, Minato? Minato shrugged. I don't know anymore. I didn't believe it going into it, but now that I'm the fourth Hokage, I'm seeing things happen to me that shouldn't happen to me. Surely you've seen the vandalism recently. Hiruzen had seen it. In the days following the Nine-Tails attack, a young boy, Irika Umino, had angrily vandalized Minato's face on the monument, spray painting the word Death's Shadow on the statue's forehead. Minato, since the Nine-Tails attack, had begun to be called the Shadow of Death and Death's Shadow, as on the day of Naruto's birth, everything fell apart. They forced the young academy student to clean up the mess personally, but Minato elected to forget it thereafter. Perhaps he was right. If he had changed anything that night, none of this would have happened. He could think of things he could have done. He could have chosen Kushina's safety over Naruto's. He could have gone after the Nine-Tails and teleported it far away from the village to give him time to deal with the masked man. Hashirama Senju had dealt with the same situation once, yet when Hashirama had handled it, everyone but Madara, or so it seemed, had survived. He couldn't help but feel that if he were stronger, or if Hashirama had been in his place, that things would have turned out for the better. Minato felt his strength was overhyped by the people. He was not worthy of the title Hokage, and many nights he told himself, tomorrow I will resign. But that day never came. time continued to pass quietly. Eventually, the attack of the Nine-Tails began to fade into ancient history as life resumed. Minato himself was beginning to relax about his belief in the fourth Hokage's curse, and Naruto was growing into a strong boy who had been entered into the academy. The only thing that had occurred between those moments was a raid and attempt to capture Orochimaru, but due to Minato's distracted state, Orochimaru did manage to escape. Not one of Minato's greatest accomplishments. Naruto seemed to be struggling a bit, falling behind, but Minato made it his personal mission to ensure that his son succeeded. When Naruto couldn't perform the clone transformation jutsu, Minato went a step further and taught him the shadow clone jutsu. He even went as far as to teach him the flying Raijin. But something Minato tended to work on the most was helping Naruto to understand what he was as Jinchuriki, and how to control the Nine-Tails power. Minato knew that his status as a Jinchuriki was where the bulk of Naruto's strength would come from. He needed to teach Naruto how to harness that power, but it was not an easy thing to do, nor was it safe. He would call Jiraiya in to help him, as Jiraiya was an expert at things like this and had many different types of sealing jutsu that would help his son grow stronger. Through Minato and Jiraiya's instruction, Naruto quickly learned how to control his power, to the very least managing to perfect his version 1 cloak. All of this together helped Naruto's grades increase and helped him go from 0 to hero in the class very quickly, being recognized as a prodigy. One that needed a little time to get started, but a prodigy nonetheless. Naruto would eventually be put on a team alongside Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno under Minato's own student, and someone he chose personally for the job, Kakashi Hatake. Naruto's strength and the values that he had placed into him made the opening test Kakashi gave them a breeze. After all, Kakashi was copying the test from Minato, who in turn had copied the test from Hiruzen. Naruto was raised around Minato and Hiruzen, and as such he knew the importance of teamwork from a very early age. Naruto and his teammates pass with flying colors and are accepted onto Kakashi's team. All the while, Minato was planning for the Chunin exams. As the Land of Waves mission was brought up and given to Team 7, Minato waited for the good news. Naruto's actions in the Land of Waves were spectacular. While Sasuke seemed more timid in his approach and needed a lot of help from Kakashi to work himself into a shinobi of renown, Naruto was completing every test and task with speed and accuracy. It seemed that the weak link in Team 7 was Sasuke. Naruto was a better shinobi and Sakura was smarter. When comparing strength and ninjutsu between Sakura and Sasuke, Sakura proved to have better chakra control and knew a wider variety of jutsu than Sasuke. And as for Naruto, given that he had studied under the god of shinobi, Hiruzen, aka the Professor, Naruto's ability to learn, his deductive reasoning, and overall knowledge of jutsu put him ahead of Sasuke. Despite how far behind Sasuke was, Minato couldn't help but fondly remember another Uchiha who wasn't as good as his teammates, Obito. It was due to this reason that Minato knew that Sasuke had the potential to surpass them all. Sasuke came from good stock. The Uchiha always produced fantastic warriors. Minato knew that there was raw potential in Sasuke's genes, he just needed to squeeze it out, bring it to the surface. Due to the many abilities in jutsu that Naruto knew, he wouldn't have much of an issue with Haku and Zabuza. By this point, Naruto could even summon Gamabunta, which made him stronger than most. In fact, few Chunin were at the level that Naruto was at. This was mostly due to his teaching and abilities as a Jinchuriki. The mission would go swimmingly, and upon return to the village, it was obvious to all that the Chunin exams were ready to occur. Team 7 would be nominated for the exams by Kakashi, who believed that they were plenty strong enough to take the test. Minato approved, wanting to see how far Naruto could go. Meanwhile, Minato had Itachi and Shisui secure the area along with the rest of the Konoha police force. Defense was key to protecting the village, especially with so many visitors. Shinobi from rival villages and villages that weren't on very good terms with Konoha even showed up. As the exams got underway, Minato was hit with a strange sense of foreboding. What could the issue be? The Forest of Death test occurred, with Suna's forces setting a new record. Team 7 wasn't far behind though, but Minato was too focused on this feeling of dread to be proud. Hiruzen would ask him what's wrong, and Minato would state that he does not know. Something feels off. Something bad is about to happen. After the preliminary rounds of the third and final part of the exam have concluded, they take a month off. Naruto returns home to ask if Minato had seen him, but is saddened to find his father obsessing over every detail of the exams, poring over the bios of everyone who entered the village. Naruto would prod his father, asking if he saw, but Minato would wave him off with a, "You did fine, now let me work." This upset Naruto quite a bit, and Hiruzen tried to comfort Naruto by stating that his father was truly proud, just preoccupied with something very important to the village. This sort of thing actually turns Naruto off from the position of Hokage. He does not want to become Hokage anymore, not like when he was younger. He wanted to have a family of his own someday, and he didn't want them to feel neglected by his work. Naruto instead began considering joining the Konoha police force, as was Sasuke's dream, in hopes of being able to protect the village in his own way. Naruto would focus more on his training with Jiraiya. He wouldn't be able to ascend to his version 2 cloak at this time, but his mastery over version 1 and his raw power increase from his training was enough to push Naruto into a new league of strength, as Sasuke trained with his own various mentors, alternating between Kakashi, Itachi, Shisui, and Fugaku, growing stronger and more varied in technique. When the month came to an end, they continued the exhibition matches, with Naruto slated to face Neji and Sasuke slated to face Gaara. Sasuke was a bit nervous, but Itachi expressed his belief that he could do it. So as the exhibition matches continue, Minato once more is struck with a near panic attack, knowing something bad is around the corner. Like some dog sensing an impending earthquake, his eyes are no longer on the matches. He would notice Rasa, the 4th Kazekage, staring at him, wondering what is up. Minato would clear his throat and attempt to focus on the matches, but deep down he feels like something bad is going to happen. Naruto completely destroys Neji in their match, but Minato barely notices. Every shinobi in the stands clap for Naruto, and even those in the Hokage's viewing box clap. Everyone save Minato. Naruto would look around at everyone clapping for him, but would notice Minato not even paying attention. This strikes a chord in Naruto to the point where he can't even hear the crowd anymore. It's dead silent. The only person whose admiration he sought, the person he fought hardest to impress, didn't even watch him. Sakura would sense this change in Naruto, and as he briskly walks out of the Coliseum, she meets up with him. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asks. Naruto kicks a trash can over and mercilessly beats it until it's not even distinguishable as a trash can anymore. "He didn't watch me! He didn't care! Why am I not good enough for him?" Sakura would put a hand on his shoulder. "You're plenty good enough. I'm sure he thinks so too. Something's just got his attention is all." Naruto looks back. "Something always has his attention, and that something is never me. Everything I do, every time I train to grow stronger, every time I master a new jutsu, I do so in hopes that he'll notice me." He held out his hand, a Rasengan forming in it. "I learned it. I learned his jutsu. I learned how to make the jutsu he invented. It was so hard, and I thought I would never get it, but Jiraiya spent weeks teaching me. I kept trying, all day and all night until my fingers bled just to master this, the crown jewel of his jutsu." A tear fell from his eye as the Rasengan disappeared, and he didn't even notice. Sakura's mouth fell open. There was nothing she could say about this. She couldn't change what Naruto was feeling because there was nothing to misconstrue. Minato was too consumed in work and worry to even notice that Naruto had busted his butt to learn a jutsu just to make him proud. It was at that time that Sasuke began his match with Gaara. He kept his distance for a while, recognizing the absolute defense of Gaara's sand gourd. He realized that there was no way for him to hurt him if he didn't get through that wall of sand, and so he decides to try the piercing power of Chidori. This works, and as such, Gaara's mental state, much like in the main timeline, declines to the point where he is no longer of use to Orochimaru. Gaara attempts to escape, all while the entire stadium is cast under Genjutsu. Meanwhile, Orochimaru, who had been disguising himself as Rasa, makes his full appearance, threatening the life of Minato. Minato would ask what this is about and why he's attacking the village. Orochimaru states that it's merely for the hopes of destroying him, destroying the leaf and taking the spoils for himself. This leads to a large battle in which Minato and Orochimaru are pitted against each other in a barrier created by the Sound 4. Minato and Orochimaru are closely matched, but Minato's sheer speed has allowed him to far outpace Orochimaru. To that end, Orochimaru tries a secret jutsu that he hopes will give him the edge. Putting his hands together, suddenly 2 coffins appear from the ground. Minato is confused. As the coffins open, 2 beings step out. The first and second Hokage, Hashirama Senju and Tobirama Senju. Minato is impressed, but only minorly. Using the dead as your puppets. Grotesque, but not too far removed from what the greatest puppeteers of Sunagakure can do. There was even a rumor that there was once a puppet master in Suna that could turn even a living human into a puppet. This is nothing. Orochimaru would scoff. "You assume that they're mere puppets. You don't give me enough credit." The puppets then step out of their coffins. "Are we alive? How did we get back?" Hashirama asks. Tobirama looks down. "Ito Tensei, we've been revived by the impure world reincarnation jutsu." Minato's confused. The Hokage look towards him. "The 4th, Tobirama states as he reads the kanji of Minato's Haori. "What happened to Hiruzen?" Minato is shocked to hear the puppets asking these questions. "No, this is a trick," he says to himself. "Nobody can bring the dead back to life." Looking into Orochimaru's pilfered Sharingan, he knows that this man lives off lies and strife. The first and second Hokage have their personalities overwritten and are sent to attack Minato. Their strength is incredible, but for the most part, they don't seem quite as strong or as legendary. It's to a point that Minato feels like he could easily beat them. But looking back on all the feats of strength he heard of in the past, it doesn't seem possible. But the longer he fights them, the more he comes to realize he cannot kill them. No damage lasts. Even paper bombs cause them to merely regenerate lost limbs and body parts. He doesn't know what to do, so he rushes Orochimaru anyway and grips onto him and threatens to kill him if he doesn't undo the jutsu. Orochimaru would do just that with a smile, allowing the previous Kage to return to the land of the dead. Minato would then have Orochimaru arrested. The damage done to Konoha is limited and few people were killed. With this over, Minato breathes a sigh of relief, the moment he feared having passed along with his anxiety. Minato would then meet with Hiruzen and tell him everything he saw. Hiruzen is shocked to hear this, but nods, telling Minato that Orochimaru made use of a technique known as impure world reincarnation. He tells him it was a technique invented by his mentor and previous Hokage, Tobirama Senju. However, due to the sacrifices needed to make it work, it was labeled as a kinjutsu and sealed up. It's not long after that Minato is sitting at a table with Naruto, the two eating together. It's dead silent. Nobody's talking. Naruto won't even look up at him. Minato asks what the issue is, and Naruto just ignores the question. Minato presses a bit deeper, and Naruto snaps at him. "You didn't even notice, did you?" Minato was confused. Notice what? Naruto throws his napkin on the table and stands to leave. Minato would repeat his question. "Notice what, Naruto?" Naruto would then storm out. Minato would be left there to think. He wipes his mouth with his napkin and stands to follow Naruto. Making it to his room, he steps in. What's wrong? Naruto holds out his hand and creates a Rasengan. Minato's eyes widen and a smile pulls across his face. "You learned my technique." Naruto looks back. "Yeah, and I even used it against Neji in the matches, but you weren't looking. You didn't even look at me. I fought my hardest to make you proud and you didn't even care to watch." Minato was startled by this. I watched." Naruto shook his head. "No, you didn't. You didn't even know I could make a Rasengan. I made a Rasengan 3 times in the battle, thinking you might have missed it. Never once did you react. You weren't watching." Minato stood there, silent for a moment. I had something else to deal with. Something was wrong, and I was trying to figure out what." Naruto scoffed. "What was wrong is that you couldn't even spare a second of your attention to notice my new jutsu." Minato cocked his head. "That's not fair, Naruto. I can't always pay attention to you. I'm the Hokage. I have a responsibility to keep this village safe." Naruto turned back, his face reddened and his eyes full of wrath. "Fair? What's not fair is that I only have a single parent. And what's worse, that parent has to be the stupid Hokage. He can't even spare a single moment of time to be my father. The only time I see you anymore is at supper before bed. We barely even talk at that moment. I've been furthering my shinobi career just so I can intrude into your world a little more and maybe bond with you over work, but that didn't work either." Minato was stunned at Naruto's outburst and left speechless as the boy continued. "Hokage. I wish I wasn't the son of the Hokage. You think you've got a responsibility to protect people? You can't protect me. You have a responsibility to me, but you ignore that to play hero. Save people? How can you save an entire village when you couldn't even save mom?" Minato suddenly backhanded Naruto across the room. He pushed his finger towards his son. "Don't you ever talk about your mother like that again." Naruto sat against the wall holding his cheek, his shocked face once more turning to contempt. "I hate you." Minato stood there just panting, his expression turning up a little more as the weight of the words Naruto had just spoken began to sink in. Naruto stepped to the window and opened it up. "I wish mom survived that day instead." He left the building, leaving Minato alone. Minato returned to his office as he thought about it all. His fists clenched and he cleared his desk, knocking all the paperwork onto the floor. Seeing the bust of himself near those of the other Kage, he smashed it and then destroyed the rest of them as well. He would rip his own picture off the wall and smash it on the corner of the desk, kicking up the side of the desk so hard that a large hole was put into the wood. He picked up a mug from the desk that had Naruto's baby handprint on it with the words "Best Dad," and in anger threw it against the wall, smashing it. As he did so, it rocked a nearby table, causing the contents to fall to the floor. Minato sat down on the desk. It began to hit him what he had just smashed, and he began to cry. From the door, 3 servants peeked in to see if their liege was okay. They just saw the destruction and their crying master, who looked up at them. He threw a pencil holder at the wall. "Get out!" They quickly closed the door and moved as fast as they could, working as hard and as fast as possible in hopes of saving their jobs. Minato sat there alone. He picked up an image of himself and Kushina that was laying on the floor along with the other contents of his desk. The glass of the frame was broken, but the image was fine. Minato picked it up and looked at it. "Kushina, what am I supposed to do? I can't do this alone. I need you." As he spoke, he gently pulled his finger across the frame as though he could touch the real Kushina through a memory. he accidentally cut his finger. He looked at the frame and noticed a drop of blood running down the front of it, dripping down the image of Kushina's body. Looking over, Minato noticed the scroll of seals laying on the ground. He picked it up and laid it open on the desk. Looking through the contents of it, he stopped when he reached a specific point. He looked over it and then stopped. He turned around and grabbed his haori and stepped out of the office. The prison was cold and dark. The sound of water dripping from leaky pipes could be heard. It was a constant reminder of the interrogation techniques that, while simple and seemingly ineffective, could be used to pull information from even the most hardened of shinobi. Water was one of the greatest tools to be used in advanced interrogation, or as Orochimaru liked to call it, torture. He himself had been subjected to such things all throughout the Second and Third Shinobi Wars, and he himself had done it to many other people too. As he sat there on the dirty bed they'd given him, he looked down at the straitjacket that they had fit him in. He sat there in the darkness, a slight smile on his face, one so light that you could not see it without close examination. He closed his eyes and waited. Minato stepped to the cell and peered in. Orochimaru, a set of ruby eyes, peered out, filling the darkness with a slight glow, like the eyes of a cat. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit, Lord Death?" Minato looked at him. "What did you say?" Orochimaru would speak. "I asked to what I owe the pleasure of a visit from Lord Fourth." Minato sighed. "You're going to tell me everything you know about the impure world reincarnation jutsu." Orochimaru would laugh. "Oh, ho, ho, ho. The Hokage wishes to learn how to twist nature to revive those who have found eternal peace." Minato's gaze narrowed, his own blue eyes throwing off similar intimidation. "The soul I long to revive has not known peace since before death." Orochimaru would gaze at him skeptically. "You know, very few things in this world are free. What makes you think I will freely give this information to you?" Minato looks around. "I assume you don't want to be subject to more interrogation." Orochimaru laughs. "The dripping water torture, waterboarding, bamboo shoots under the fingernails. I do these things to myself regularly to build up tolerance. Torture me all day, every day, for months, and nothing will change. Ask that brute Ibiki Marino about my tolerance and hear what he has to say." Minato growls. "What do you want then?" Orochimaru smiles. "Now the real negotiations begin. First off, I want out of this wretched cell. I want my freedom. Freedom to come and go as I please. And second, I want the scroll of seals." Minato almost called off the deal then and there. Orochimaru scoffed. "Stingy with your secrets, are you? If you won't share your secrets with me, I won't share my secrets with you. Simple as that. If you were capable of deciphering the jutsu in that scroll, then you would not have come to me. And if I can't have the actual scroll, then I merely want the rights to make a copy. I don't care about the actual scroll, only the information inside. Give me that and my freedom, and you'll get what you want, and you'll never hear from me again." Minato thought for a moment about it. He then had one of the Anbu near him open the cell. They removed Orochimaru's straitjacket. Orochimaru stood and followed the Hokage. Leaving and following Minato back to the Hokage's residence in disguise, they entered and Orochimaru began to look over the scroll of seals, using his Sharingan to copy its contents into a second scroll that he proceeded to swallow like a snake. Minato watched him. "I held up my end of the bargain. Now you hold up yours." Orochimaru turned around, sitting down in Minato's chair as he looked around and smiled darkly. "I once hoped to sit in this chair, named the fourth Hokage. The only reason I wanted to be Hokage, though, was to get my hands on the scroll of seals and have complete freedom to do whatever experiments I so choose. I technically have that now, so whether I have that useless title or not, my dreams are fulfilling themselves." Minato stepped forward and knocked Orochimaru's feet from his desk. "Tell me what I need to know. Now. If you don't, I won't let you leave Konoha in any other way than an urn." Orochimaru rolled his eyes. "You're such a killjoy." He sits forward. "Tell me, how did she die? Last I heard, Kushina did not die of normal circumstances." Minato spoke. "She used the Reaper Death Seal to stop the Nine Tails." Orochimaru sighed. "That's a bump in the plan." Minato would ask why, and Orochimaru would continue. "Because she does not exist in the Pure Land. The impure world reincarnation jutsu can only summon the soul of those who either reside in the Pure Land or in the living world somehow, even limbo, but not those whose souls have been devoured by the Shinigami." Minato's brow lowers. "How do we fix that?" he asked, every word sounding like an insult. Orochimaru wiped some of Minato's spit from his face. "Simple. We retrieve her soul from the Shinigami." Orochimaru led Minato through the night. He summoned two of his own shinobi, Kimimaro and Tayuya. They greeted their master with a respectful bow. Orochimaru returned it. He led them to the Uzumaki shrine. Within were plenty of masks, many of the same make. Selecting a single Hanya mask, he gave it to Kimimaro and told him that Kimimaro would serve him better in death than in life. Kimimaro nodded and took the mask. Orochimaru explained what he had to do, and without any hesitation at all, Kimimaro pulled a bone blade and stabbed it into his stomach, slicing it open as the Shinigami behind them did the same. Kimimaro would fall to his knees after this and pass away soon after. The souls of those within the Shinigami were then allowed to leave, and that included the soul of Kushina. Meanwhile, Minato stood there and wondered what it was he was even agreeing to. This was unlike him, allowing others to sacrifice their lives to fulfill his own goals. Was it possible that he was becoming as bad as Orochimaru? Orochimaru then cast a genjutsu over Toyuya before she could understand what he was going to do. Orochimaru began to write out a formula on the ground and begin the process. Once the formula was finished, he put his fingers together and finished the ritual. Paper seemed to cover the body of Toyuya as the soul of Kushina was bonded to her. Upon completion, Orochimaru returned to Minato and made a hand sign. I released your wife. She's now no longer under my control. Do with her as you will. I've kept up my end of the bargain. Now, I am leaving. Orochimaru turned and left the area. Minato didn't stop him. He remained a man of his word. He was speechless as he watched. His wife stood there. She seemed a little different, but for better or worse, it was her. He could feel it. He ran over and lifted her above his head and hugged onto her. He began to weep on her shoulder. Kushina, I missed you so badly. She remained silent during the hug. When Minato pulled away, he looked at his wife, but she wasn't smiling at all. She just gazed into him, not even looking into his eyes. She was looking through him, into his very soul. He asked her what was wrong, and she simply responded by asking a question. Minato, what did you do? Traitor! The voices cried out in the night. Voices churning, the clinking of old farming equipment and weapons from the Third Shinobi World War. Minato looked down from his balcony and at the people below. A mob was forming. Riots were about to begin. He turned and stepped back in. He rubbed his face as he closed the blinds. Maybe if he turned out the lights, they might think he wasn't home. Moving towards his bedroom, he saw the door cracked open at the bathroom, a light squeezing through. He peeked in and saw Kushina standing at the sink. She looked into the mirror. She looked upon the lines on her face. Cracks like a broken vessel someone desperate had tried to piece together again. Her irises were the same as always, but her sclera was black as night, a sign that she was now a vessel devoid of a soul. She looked back at him. I can't believe you've done this, Minato. He looked at her. Kushina, I can't do it alone. She looked back. Minato, you fought in the last World War and had people who are now known as Kage shaking in their boots. You're among the strongest warriors in the world. You fought a tailed beast, and you're telling me you can't do this alone? I can't do this alone, he shouted out. I can't raise Naruto alone. I can't be a father and a Kage at the same time. Not alone. He hates my guts right now because I don't have enough time to spend with him. She shook her head. And so you decided that since you couldn't handle being a father or a Kage, you would try God next? What was I supposed to do? He shouted out. I was desperate. The opportunity presented itself. I didn't even know there was a jutsu that could resurrect the dead. Then when Orochimaru offered to show me how it worked, what more could I do? How could I say no? She pointed to her lips. Just like this. N-O. No. He sighed. Kushina, I don't need this right now. For 12 years I've been by myself, and now that we finally have the chance to see each other again, you're going to just argue with me all night? She sighed and went back to the mirror. Silence passed for a few minutes. Minato spoke up. I'm tired. Let's go to bed. She looked at him through the reflection. I don't sleep, Minato. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to eat. I don't need to drink. I don't run out of energy. I'm not mortal anymore. I don't need these mortal things. He stood there for a moment longer. For my sake. She looked back again. Everything is for your sake, isn't it? I never thought I'd see the day when you became so self-centered. I never thought I would see a day when a hero became powerless. My death robbed you of everything, didn't it? Look, Minato, I'm flattered, but what you did, it goes against the very laws of nature. This is a forbidden jutsu and you know it. Minato shook his head and turned, going to bed. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore. As he hit the bed, he felt more alone than he ever had. Worse than the night she died. He was beginning to see the truth. Kushina was dead, and that hadn't changed. In an attempt to bring her back to life, he merely dragged up an echo, a long-lost sound from the valley of death that reverberated within a cold shell. But he still loved her, and somewhere he hoped that maybe their love could continue. Somehow. Elsewhere, Naruto had been gone for a while. He had decided to spend time with Sasuke at his house. Fugaku had attempted to send the boy home, but Makoto had told him that something was obviously bothering Naruto, so he was able to stay the night at the Uchiha clan compound in the clan head's residence. He told Sasuke everything. About the fight, about Minato's lack of care, about the feeling that he was second place to the job of Hokage. Sasuke would scoff, "Welcome to my world. Itachi's the one my father hangs every ounce of pride on. I work so hard to reach the same level as him, but my father doesn't see it. All I get is an occasional good morning from the old man. You gotta understand, Naruto, what your father thinks of you doesn't mean crap. What should matter is what you think about yourself. If you think you did good, then you did good. Anyone who thinks differently can go cry about it. You're more than the Hokage's son." Naruto would agree to that, but deep down he still wanted to feel acknowledged. This wasn't about whether he worked hard or not for nothing. This was about his father. As angry as he was, he loved Minato. He idolized him. Minato was everything Naruto wanted to be. He just wanted to make him happy. As he lay there looking at the moon, he thought about his father. "I can't believe I told him I hated him," he thought. "I can't believe I said I wished that mom survived instead. How could I say that to him?" Naruto thought deeply on that moment, and the guilt made it very hard to sleep. The day thereafter, Naruto would have breakfast with the Uchiha clan and thank them for their hospitality. He would then begin his walk home. No, he wasn't walking. He was running home. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, he made his way back to the Hokage's residence. On his way there, he saw the mob standing in front of the gate. Naruto stopped by the mob and tapped one of the protesters on the shoulder. "Hey, mister, what is going on?" The man turned back. "Your father, the Death Hokage. He let Orochimaru go free." Naruto was confused. "What do you mean?" The man scoffed. "After all the damage Orochimaru did, the lives lost, your father just lets him go. And what did we gain? Nothing. No justice, no reparations, nothing." Naruto couldn't understand this. It had to be a lie. His father was a selfless man and a man of justice. He jumped over the walls and made his way in. Walking in, he found the entryway barricaded and masked shinobi standing about, weapons in hand. He dropped his backpack at the door and made his way deeper. He looked for the Hokage's office. He opened the door to find Minato just sitting there. "Dad?" Minato didn't even look back. "Naruto." Naruto looked around at the trashed room. What's going on? They said that you let Orochimaru go?" "That's because he did," a voice said from behind. Naruto looked back to see Kushina enter. He stared for a moment before looking back at Minato. "Who's the creepy lady?" She slapped him in the back of his head in rage. "I'm your mother, moron." He grabbed the back of his head. "Hey, don't go slapping me, you old hag. He stopped. "Wait, Mom?" He was obviously confused. "But you're... Why? How?" Minato didn't speak. Kushina looked at him. "If you don't tell him, Minato, I will." Minato just kept staring out at the village. "I made a pact with Orochimaru. He said he'd use his jutsu to resurrect Kushina, and in exchange, I would let him go." "And?" Kushina demanded. "And I let him copy the scroll of seals." Naruto was in awe. He looked back. You let a shinobi who killed hundreds of people in a mass terrorist attack not only escape, but take our scroll of seals?" Minato spun his chair around. "It was to bring your mother back." Naruto's face began to grow redder. I can't believe this." Naruto slammed the table and pointed at Minato. "I can't believe this. I was going to come here and apologize to you. I was going to apologize for pushing you past your limits, for demanding attention when you were too busy. I was going to say sorry, but no, I won't. Not anymore. What you did, you let hundreds die for nothing. And when Orochimaru kills again, that blood will be on your hands. And not only that, but you had him defile Mom's memory. You had him drag her up from eternal slumber. I can't believe you're actually Lord Death." Minato looked up at him questioningly. Naruto almost looked like he was ready to enter the version 1 tailed beast cloak. "For so long, the kids at the academy, they called you that because of the Nine Tails attack. I punched them. They told me that you were destined to be the worst Hokage ever because you were the fourth, like Yagura and Rasa. They said you might even destroy the village. I beat them up and got beat up by them because of that. And now, you're proving them right. You just let a terrorist escape. Not for the village, but for personal gain. That's power abuse." He shook his head. "I never should have come back here. This was a mistake. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry I said what I said to you the other day. It wasn't wrong." Naruto turned and left, storming out, not even taking his bag this time. Minato looked up at Kushina. "Why are you doing this to me, Kushina?" She looked to him. "Because there are things you need to set right." She stood in front of his desk. Don't think for a moment that I don't love you anymore. I love Minato, the one I knew, the one who stood up for what was right, the one who wasn't afraid to sacrifice, the hero. Nobody likes this version of you, Minato. Everyone wants to see the hero. He looked at her. Nobody wants to see the human side of me though, do they? I'm some idealistic hero without flaws, some legend. I'm human too. He walked around the table and sighed, caressing his cheek. She knelt down beside him. I know, Minato. I know better than anyone the pain you hide, the pain you fight through. But you have to understand, this isn't right. People have sacrificed their lives, and you're using their sacrifice to get back something you lost. If you can't be a father and you can't be a Kage, then choose one. Focus on one and let the other go. Let the Hokage position go if you're no longer capable. It's what Hiruzen did. There's no shame in it. He listened to her speak. Even if I did, Naruto will never forgive me for what I've done. She gave a gentle smile. He will, but you have to set things right. He looked down. Will I have to lose you again? She nodded. Eventually I will have to leave this world and return to the afterlife. But I can't do it so long as my soul is burdened with worry. Worry for you. You need to resolve these problems or I can't move on. Tears rolled down his face. Do you hate me for dragging you back? Defiling your grave? She shook her head. To have one more day with you is worth all the gold in the world. But I would never sacrifice something that was someone else's. That's where you went wrong. You must set it right. You must kill Orochimaru. Outside the village proper, Naruto was stomping off. It was there that he saw Neji and Hinata. They saw his face a mile away and didn't even need to use the Byakugan's power to know that something was wrong. Hinata's face turned red and she looked like she wanted to run away. Hello, Naruto-kun. He looked to her. Hello, Hinata. Neji saw his expression. What's wrong, Naruto? Naruto looked at Neji. I just realized that my father is scum. Surely you exaggerate, Neji said. Naruto shook his head. No. I heard that my father let Orochimaru go, and as it turns out, it's true. But it doesn't end there. I had hoped that maybe, if it were true, that he had some explanation for it. You know, maybe he was having him tracked. Maybe there was a secret threat to the village. But no. I came to learn that he did it all for personal gain. Hinata gasped. Lord Minato let Orochimaru go for personal gain? Naruto nodded. Neji spoke up. What did he get in return? Orochimaru used some technique to bring my mom back to life as a zombie. Neji's eyes widened. A zombie? Naruto's fists clenched. My father. I used to think he was a man of integrity, who put the village ahead of his personal gain. But now I've come to realize that he's no better than anyone else. In fact, he may be worse. Well, I'm not going to let this stand. I'm going to fix this. How do you plan to fix this, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked. He looked at her. I'm going to kill Orochimaru. Surely you don't mean to go all by yourself, Neji said. If I have to. Neji crossed his arms. I would go as well, but I have a duty to my clan. I'll go, Hinata said. And you're coming too, Neji. He was dumbfounded. But Lady Hinata, what about our duty to the clan? She looked to him. I'm still a member of the main family, she stated. Until Hanabi takes my father's seat, I'm a member of the main branch. This means the duty you must fulfill is to protect me. I'm going with Naruto. That means that the only way for you to protect me is to come as well. Neji thought about it. Should we tell your father? She shook her head. We can leave him a message, but we can't tell him straight out or he'll try to stop us. Naruto's brows were raised. He had never known Hinata could be so crafty. Maybe we should bring some others, Naruto said. Perhaps Sasuke. Bushy brows? Neji nodded. Yes, those two definitely need to come with us. He then continued. But have you thought this through completely, Naruto? For example, how do you plan on finding Orochimaru? Naruto's fierce and excited expression suddenly turned to embarrassment. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I can help with that, a voice said from the shadows. The three turned to look. Neji stepped in front of Hinata and readied his gentle fist. A man bearing a swirling orange mask stepped out of the shadows. Who are you? Naruto demanded. The man stood there and motioned to himself. You may call me Toby, he said. I'm a member of a particular organization, a mercenary unit formed of missing nin. You can call us the Akatsuki. Naruto racked his brain trying to find out where he had heard that before. Toby continued. We know where Orochimaru's base of operations is located. I will gladly take you there. Neji then called out. Why would you help us? What do you have to gain from all this? Orochimaru is a traitor to our organization. When he escaped Konoha, we gave him a place to call home, and instead he attacked us. He maimed one of our members and stole their Kekai Genkai. a set of Sharingan. He also gathered information on us, and if that information gets out to the 5 shinobi nations, then the members of our group may be hunted and killed. In helping you find and kill Orochimaru, I can return to my ally what was lost, and destroy the information before he can spread it. And you can avenge your village and reclaim the stolen knowledge he took from you. Does that not sound like a good idea? Neji pulled Naruto to the side. Every sense I have is telling me this is a bad idea. We can't trust this man. Naruto looked at Neji. But what other choice do we have? We'll never find Orochimaru otherwise. We've got to take the chance. If this guy betrays us, we can just jump him. This is ill-advised, Naruto. Naruto nodded. I understand, but it's our only shot at cleaning up my old man's mess. He looked behind Neji. We'll do it. We'll meet tonight at midnight, just outside the gate. I'll be bringing 2 others with me. Tobi's head shifted to show he was pleased. He offered a salute to them before teleporting away. That night, the 3 of them prepared to leave. Naruto would stop by Sasuke's place as Neji went to recruit Rock Lee. Naruto looked up at him from the ground below. We're going to find and kill Orochimaru. Sasuke scoffed. And what makes you think that we can do this? Naruto then revealed the plan to him. Sasuke rolled his eyes. You really are all 7 colors of stupid, aren't you? You can't trust the Akatsuki. My brother's been watching them for months. They're a fringe terrorist organization themselves, with ties to the international political assassination. I know, Naruto said. But they're our only chance, and they seem adamant on killing him for maiming one of their allies and gathering sensitive information. And if we're lucky, we might learn a few things too. Stuff we can bring back to the village and use to bring them down. You assume that they'll let us live long enough to do so. Have you even asked yourself why they haven't just hunted him down personally? Why they chose to wait until someone barely Chunin level decides to kill Orochimaru to move? What was stopping them before? What about us makes them want to move now? Naruto shrugged aggressively. I don't know. Maybe we're elite shinobi. Maybe they're idiots. Who knows? We'll never know unless we go along with it. So are you coming or not? Sasuke sighed and turned back to get his gear on. Someone's got to pull your chaff out of the fire. Together they left and met up at the gate. Sasuke looked around. Is this all? Are these seriously the only people you've put on your team, Naruto? A kid who can't use ninjutsu, a stuck-up shinobi with the ability to tickle you into submission, and a girl so cowardly that she can't even stand in front of the whole team? Neji stepped forward, chest to chest with Sasuke, forehead to forehead. I dare you to impugn Lady Hinata's honor again. Lee stepped between them. Let us not fight amongst ourselves. We are all friends. We have a mission to complete, so we should all act like professionals, or we will never accomplish it. Hinata agreed with Lee's statement, pulling Neji back. Let's just do what we came here for. Naruto agreed. Yeah. Let's just put aside our differences for now and complete this. They opened the gate and stepped out of the village. In the trees away from them, they found the masked man waiting for them. Shall we begin on our way then? The group nodded. Together they began to get a move on. Back at the village, Minato was sitting in his chair. He was almost asleep. Kushina stepped into the room and saw him. She had been about to speak, but upon seeing this, her mouth closed and curled up into a small smile. She walked over and knelt down beside him. I'm proud of you, Minato. He looked down. I just don't know if I can lose you again. She stood. There are few things in this world that last. It's inevitable that we'll have to say goodbye again, but when we do, I want you to promise me one thing. What? He asked. Promise me you'll leave me with a smile, she said. For a moment, he was silent. How can I smile? Real easy, she said. Like this. She points to her upturned lips. Listen, Minato. Like I said, few things in life last. That includes goodbyes. You will eventually see me again. You just gotta be patient, okay? When I return to the afterlife, don't view it as a death. View it as me going out of town. Yes, out of town to another village to get our new home ready. It may take years, but I'll think of you always. I'll get our home ready, and when I'm done, I'll come get you personally. Minato had tears in his eyes, but his lips raised and he smiled. She then stood and offered a hand. Now, how about you and I go make the best of our time together? He took it and stood. The night passed and the morning came. Minato was sleeping late, but suddenly the door was nearly kicked in by a guard, and both Kushina and Minato awoke. Lord Forth, you've got to come see this, the man shouted out. Minato sat there in bed. Fine, I'm coming, just close the door, please. The shinobi seemed to grow flustered. Of course, Lord Forth. He closed the door. Minato sat there and sighed. Duty calls. He looked over and kissed Kushina. I'll see you later, Ku. Work calls. He stood and grabbed something suitable for his position and stepped out. Walking down the hallway, he would enter his office to see a posse of people. Fugaku Uchiha was here, as was Hiyashi Hyuga, Might Guy, and Kakashi. Minato fixed the positioning of his haori and stepped over to his desk and sat down. To what do I owe this honor? He asked. Hiyashi laid a sheet of paper down on the table. This. Minato read it. It was Hinata's handwriting. It detailed their plans to go and kill Orochimaru and reclaim the Scroll of Seals. He looked up. "When did you find this?" Hiyashi crossed his arms. "At sunrise. They must have left sometime last night." Minato stood. He looked at the Anbu. "Get as many shinobi as you can ready. As many sensory-type shinobi as you can. We've gotta hurry and hope it isn't too late." In the trees, the 5-man team leapt from branch to branch. Leading the way a fair distance ahead was the mysterious Toby, whose black and red cloak made it hard to see him among the shadows of the trees. Eventually they came to a stop by the Tenchi Bridge. "Hey mister," Naruto called out. "There's something bothering us. If you knew where Orochimaru was all along and wanted him killed, why do you need us?" The masked man looked back and spoke with a voice like silk. "We do not actually know where he is. Just a general direction. His base is well hidden. We cannot find it. We require one with the Byakugan, a dojutsu capable of seeing through walls and earth. We require the Hyuga clan's Kekai Genkai to actually locate him." They continue to follow after Toby, who leads them deeper. Toby looks back and asks Hinata and Neji to activate their Byakugan and look for any signs that Orochimaru's lab is nearby. When they ask what exactly they're looking for, he mentions that Orochimaru's facility takes up a lot of electricity to keep going, and likely taps into the nearby power grid somehow. He tells them to look through the earth for buried power lines. They continue to do so until they find some. Toby stops and points in the direction of one of the power lines. In that direction is the nearest power station. He turns around and points in the other direction. That means that in that direction, Orochimaru's hideout must be hidden. They all continue to move until they reach the facility. They stop nearby. This is where the Byakugan will really come in handy. "I need you to search the surrounding area for any sensors or traps as we move in. If we are to assassinate Orochimaru without a fight, we need the element of surprise. And that means we have to find him before he detects us." Hinata and Neji look at each other and nod. They begin to scan the area. As they do so, they find every instance of a sensor or trap. They manage to make their way in. At this time, they pass by many experiments, one of those being the Horn of the Eight Tails. Toby stopped by it and felt it. It possessed tremendous chakra. Under his mask, he smiled as he touched it and teleported out with his Kamui. Naruto followed Hinata and Neji in deeper. The Hyuga were leading the way, their eyes and fingers pointing out everything to watch out for. "Someone is up ahead," Hinata said. Neji hugged against the wall and told them to be quiet. Right as Kabuto came around the corner, Neji struck out at him with the 8 trigram 64 palms, taking him down. They then made it deeper into the facility until Hinata mentioned that there was someone behind the door. They gathered behind it and waited. On a count of 3, Rock Lee kicked the door off its hinges and the 5 shinobi rushed in to find Orochimaru sitting on a throne, his leg crossed, his head propped up against his hand. He had a nefarious smile. He knew they were coming. "Foolish children, you managed to hide your presence from my security system, but you did not account for my ability to sense chakra." He stood. "I told your father, the Hokage, that if he fulfilled his end of the bargain, that he would never see me again. It seems his conscience would not allow that to happen." Naruto raised his fist. "I'm not here because of my father. I came all by myself. My father may have let you escape and tarnish the good name of the village, but I won't." Orochimaru laughed. "So then you really are the village idiot. Kabuto told me you weren't the sharpest crayon in the box, but this? I didn't expect this level of idiocy." They suddenly rushed forward to attack Orochimaru. Sasuke had his Sharingan activated, but they were nothing compared to Orochimaru's. Orochimaru possessed a set of 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and Sasuke currently was only at 2. They started out with a pincer attack. Sasuke would come in from the right, and Rock Lee in his 3rd gate rushed in from the left. As Sasuke came in, Orochimaru raised both arms to stop the kicks of both opponents from striking him. From the front, however, Neji and Hinata ran. Hinata was ready to use her gentle fist to defend Neji as he begrudgingly followed her in, ready to let Hinata spearhead, and himself to use the 8 trigram 64 palms to shut down all the major tenketsu in Orochimaru's system. Meanwhile, Naruto in his version 1 cloak raced across the ceiling, dropping behind Orochimaru where he prepared a Rasengan. He rushed forward with it in an attempt to strike him in the back. To his surprise, Orochimaru jumped into the air, dragging Lee and Sasuke with him. Naruto couldn't stop and accidentally struck Hinata with the Rasengan, sending her flying back. Blood began to run from her nose and mouth as the Rasengan's impact had seemingly done some internal damage. Neji skid to a stop. "Lady Hinata!" Neji wanted to berate Naruto, who was already apologizing, but before they could continue, Orochimaru came down upon them, using Lee and Sasuke as clubs to smash the ground and send Naruto and Neji flying. He then proceeded to toss Sasuke and Lee into the nearby walls. "Where did that orange-masked man go? He disappears right when you need him the most!" Orochimaru laughed. "You foolish children. It's a wonder you made it this far. Did you just luck upon this place? He laughed. He looked over. You did at least bring me a prize. Naruto looked over to Hinata. Orochimaru stared at her nefariously. The Hyuga are meticulous about protecting their dojutsu, so very few cases of any Byakugan forming without the curse mark of the caged bird. Lady Hinatas are among the few that can actually be transplanted. The only dojutsu I crave more than the Sharingan. Suddenly a man appears behind him. A dojutsu more desirable than the Sharingan. I can believe it, but I highly doubt that it's the simple Byakugan. Orochimaru turns around to see him. Who are you? Toby clicked his tongue. I suppose you wouldn't know, now would you? After all, I'm not one to show my face. Orochimaru noted the cloak he wore. The Akatsuki, huh? A bunch of fools and short-sighted brutes. Toby stood there. We're only fools and short-sighted brutes to those too short-sighted to see what we strive for. Orochimaru scoffed. And what you strive for is anarchy. The fall of every nation and the institution of a single dictatorship that rules by fear. Toby's single visible eye narrowed behind his mask. From behind him, he dropped the chain. You left the organization you swore your life to, and as such, you forfeited your life. Goodbye, Orochimaru. Toby ran towards the snake. Orochimaru cackled, seeing the bluntness of his attack. A head-on attack? He couldn't be this foolish. He rushed towards him as well. At a certain point, he would come to a stop and extend his hand out. Snakes shot out from them. But to Orochimaru's surprise, the masked man phased through both them and him. Suddenly, Orochimaru found himself caught in the chains. What? Suddenly, the chains were tightened, and Orochimaru was severed in two. Toby turned around and looked at Orochimaru. But Orochimaru rose from his body in the form of a snake and attempted to capture Toby. Toby would phase through the venom. Oh, come on now. Is that really your last-ditch effort? Toby would weave hand signs and send a fireball at Orochimaru, burning him up and turning him to ash. Naruto stood and celebrated by pumping his fist into the air with a spinning jump. Heck yeah, we did it! Neji was currently checking on Hinata, tending to her. Sasuke stood, gripping his shoulder. You destroyed Orochimaru's body? Didn't you want to take his Sharingan back from him? Naruto stopped and listened. Sasuke continued. I haven't seen any intel on you or your organization, and the single reason you came to take back those Sharingan is now impossible. What did you really come here for? The others perked up and looked to Toby. Very observant. But I would expect no less from an Uchiha. Suddenly, Toby flickered and raced forward, putting a fist into Naruto's chest, knocking him through the doors. Following him out, Toby turned back and put his hand on the ground, summoning a thick wooden sculpture that blocked the exit. He then grabbed Naruto by the collar. Come with me, Ninetales. On the other side of the wood, they attempted to break it down. Lee would command them to get out of the way. When the way was clear, he opened up his fifth gate and rushed forward with a kick that shattered the wood and allowed them out. By the time they broke through, Toby was gone, and so was Naruto. Outside of the facility, a very good distance away, Naruto opened his eyes. Where? His blurry eyes cleared just enough for him to make out Toby's face. The man stood there menacingly, finally awake now. Naruto shook his head. How did you know I was the Ninetale? Toby scoffed. It was obvious. The way you use its power. I saw your usage of it during the exams, but I suppose that wasn't what gave it away. What really gave it away was me witnessing you gain its power on the day of your birth. Naruto's eyes widened. Huh? The man stood there. October 10th. 12 years ago, I did to your mother what I'm about to do to you. He gripped the zipper of Naruto's jacket and pulled it down, exposing the 8-trigram seal. Your father once stopped me from taking this. In doing so, it was placed into you, the only other vessel nearby besides himself. Why didn't he place it into himself? Maybe he was too scared. Your father's image certainly keeps seeming to fall apart in front of you, doesn't it? Well, he stalled me, but I suppose he couldn't stop me. 12 years later, and it's still going to be mine. He placed his hand on the seal and twisted. A thick, black, inky substance began to pour from it, dripping out of Naruto's mouth as well. He let out a muffled cry. As the seal was opened, Toby began to pull chakra out of it. If you have any last words, Naruto, I suggest saying them now. Once this is out, you won't ever have a chance to speak again. Minato raced through the forest with Kakashi, Hiashi and Hisashi, Might Guy, Fugaku Uchiha, and various other Anbu agents, each of which were using their sensory abilities to keep track of the children. Kakashi followed, his Ninken leading the way, keeping track of their scent. Do you really think they can even find Orochimaru, Minato? Hiashi asked. Minato looked back. I have no doubt. If it's true that they have help from the Akatsuki, then there is no doubt. But worse, I feel that they're all in danger, not from Orochimaru, but from this Toby man. Why do you think that, Lord Hokage? Might Guy asked. Minato gulped.
Because I'm pretty sure that he's the one who killed Kushina. They reached the Tenchi Bridge. Pakun sniffs around a little. They were through here, he said. They went that way. He pointed with his nose. Minato stepped forward. Suddenly there was an explosion in the nearby forest and an expulsion of intense pressure and chakra. There was a loud roar. Minato looked towards the distance and saw the Ninetales. No! Naruto! He rushed in that direction, followed closely by his squad. Just like he was known as, the yellow flash of the leaf moved as fast as he could, pulling away from the others, his emotions driving him forward, his legs burning from the speed and intensity of his jumps. But his conviction in knowing that this entire thing was his own fault pushed him forward. He can still be saved, he said to himself. Naruto can still be saved. I just gotta put it back in quickly and he'll survive. Those words he used to comfort himself. He came into the clearing, created when the Ninetales appeared. Trees were blown over. In the middle was a set of rocks that Kushina had been chained to, but now dangling by his wrists was Naruto, a cruel recreation of the situation that had led him this far. Nearby, the titanic beast loomed. Minato rushed forward. Just like last time. I just gotta sever the contract and I can save him. He put a marked kunai in his mouth and wielded two more, one in each of his hands. The masked man stood there. His attire was different, his mask nothing like it was prior, but he was still recognizable, especially by the aura he gave off. An intense hatred. A hatred of the world. Yet at the same time, there was a respect for Minato in his eyes. The man spoke. Ah, Lord Fourth, I see you too have suffered. My apologies, but I must make you suffer again. Consider it retribution for that night in Konoha 12 years ago. The chain he wielded dropped once more behind the masked man. Minato's teeth sank into the wooden handle of the kunai in his mouth, leaving a depression in the grip. But he took a deep breath. Same battle, same outcome. He rushed forward with his kunai ready. He threw one, and it phased right through the man. It buried itself in the ground behind Tobi. Minato teleported and formed a Rasengan. He attempted to rush the man from behind. The man turned and charged once more. Minato threw a second kunai at the man's head, which passed through, phasing with Kamui. Minato attempted to teleport behind and smash the Rasengan into his back, but to his horror, Tobi never turned solid. A crater was formed with Minato in the middle. From above, Tobi turned solid once more and sent his chain out like a whip to strike Minato, wrapping itself around his throat. Minato fell to one knee and choked as Tobi stood above him. Fool. I thought you were better than this. Trying the same method twice on a Sharingan user. Even spaced 12.5 years apart, if you can remember it, then know I surely never forgot. After all, you wounded my pride that day, and scars take a long time to heal. But know that in this one moment, I finally feel like I'm even with you. Minato grunted and used his flying Raijin technique to teleport to the kunai that missed Tobi. He turned around just in time to see a tailed beast bomb rolling across the ground, coming in his direction. He just barely dodged it. He looked up to see Tobi, standing atop the Ninetales' head. Consider this day the beginning of your losses, and the golden age of your curse, Lord Death. Suddenly, the Ninetales was teleported away with Kamui, along with Tobi. Minato stood. He then ran to Naruto, who was still dangling by his bonds. He cut the chains and lowered his son into his arms. Naruto! Naruto! Naruto was hardly breathing as he leaned against Minato. Naruto. The boy slowly opened his eyes. Dad. Minato sat down and pulled Naruto closer. I'm here. Naruto couldn't even look back. Dad. I'm sorry, he said as tears began to stream from his face. I'm sorry that I said that I hated you and that I wish Mom survived instead. I'm sorry I said that. I was mad. I didn't mean it. Minato nodded. I know, Naruto. I knew you didn't mean it. I forgave you the moment you said it. I could never be mad at you. You're my precious son. If I could have died to bring your mother back, and I knew it would have made you happy, I would have done it. Naruto groped around for Minato's hand. Minato took it. Naruto's breathing was quick but short. Dad, what's gonna happen to me on the other side? Minato held him. You'll find your grandma and grandpa. They'll take care of you for a while, and when I help your mother overcome any regrets she possesses, I'll send her to you. Naruto squeezed his father's hand. I don't want to die. Minato held Naruto tighter. Slowly, Naruto's breathing came to a stop, and its heart lost its beat. In the distance, Minato's party watched on. They dared not approach. They all knew what it meant for a Jinchuriki to be stripped of their tailed beast, and they wanted Minato to have his privacy. Minato held his son in his arms, and at that moment, he flashed back to when he held Kushina in his arms. when she died just the same. He remembered how broken he was in body, mind, and spirit. He woke up in the hospital with the singular desire to find his son. He remembered being led to the nursery where he didn't even have the strength to hold him. All he had the strength to do was to offer his finger for Naruto to grip. And now that hand was still gripping his finger. But slowly, the strength that developed over those 12 years of growth faded to nothing as his hand fell from Minato's. Minato remembered the first night he spent at home with Naruto. He didn't want to sleep, and Minato found himself holding him, bouncing him around. He recalled laying in bed with the babe on his chest. He had read that babies relax more easily when they're exposed to the heartbeat of their parent. At the same time, he too was being comforted by the infant's heartbeat. And now that heartbeat was gone. The body no longer held life. Minato had just lost the only member of his family left to him. This should not have been. No child should ever die before their parent. Minato sat there, his hands shaking. He looked at the inky substance in the palm of his hand. "Oh God, please. Please help me. God, please help me," he said over and over again as his breathing quickened. He didn't know what to do. He just sat there. As tears streamed down his face, he cried out to the heavens. In his heart, he wanted to kill. In his soul, he wanted to die. He cried out so loudly that the birds hovering above, circling them, began to flee. He pulled out a kunai and placed it on his chest, right above his heart. No more. I can handle no more. Kakashi would appear by his side. When had he gotten there? Had he always been there? Kakashi gripped Minato's wrist gently but firmly. He pulled the kunai away from his mentor's chest. Minato laid over across Kakashi, who could only hug his mentor. Minato cried, and to a point, even Kakashi did. The return to Konoha was bitter. A rain began to fall from the sky, as if the heavens themselves were crying over the death of Minato's only son. Hinata was taken to the hospital where they monitored her condition. Neji was there being checked out as well. His injury was in his shoulder. It was a simple dislocation that he would surely survive, but you couldn't tell just by looking at him. Sasuke stood in his room in his home. He had left his own lecture. Closing the door to his room behind him, he punched the wall. Not just once, but twice. Thrice. Multiple times, leaving marks of blood on the wall as his rage-filled knuckles dripped. Sasuke opened his eyes to reveal the presence of a Mangekyou Sharingan. Minato stood before the open grave, wearing all black. Slowly, the casket was lowered into the ground. Minato did his absolute best to hide his tears and maintain his image as strong leader, but how could he? Who would expect such anyway? He cried openly, with only Kushina there to comfort him. Tears streamed down her own cheeks, but she was more concerned about Minato, as Kushina knew that very soon she too would return to heaven to be with her child. But in doing so, she would have to leave Minato. She began to wonder if she even could cast off her regrets now, or if they would bind her to this earth like a wandering spirit. As the dirt was packed, they took one last look at the headstone before leaving. Naruto Uzumaki, born October 10th, a year and a half into the first term of the 4th Hokage, died April 27th, 13 years into the first term of the 4th Hokage. Minato looked at it. 13 was an unlucky number to many cultures, and it was on a headstone beside the number 4. He truly was cursed. The curse of Death's Hokage. Minato stood there and watched as they lowered his son into the ground. He tried his best to hold it together, to maintain his image, but how could he? How could he not cry? Who would expect that much? A man had just lost his only child. Tears streamed down his face as he lost his composure. Kushina would hug him to comfort him, tears streaming down her cheeks as well. She cried not only for the separation of herself from Naruto, knowing that soon she would too join him. She cried knowing how much pain he had to go through. The fear. She cried for Minato, the remnants of a broken man shattered by the final loss. Was life worth living anymore, he wondered to himself. Why not just free Kushina and end it all? As if sensing his thoughts, she whispered into his ear, "Don't give up. Fight. Live for Naruto's sake, and mine." As they left and began to return home, they were stopped by a few men in the streets. "Do you see now what your actions have brought upon us, Lord Death?" Minato stopped, his head still facing the ground, his hair drooped over his face, rain running down the back of his coat. The man spoke again. "You played God. You pardoned a man who murdered thousands for your own selfish desire. A selfish desire that went against nature. Are you happy now? Maybe now you understand. You get what you deserve." Moving like a flash of lightning, the sky roared with thunder as Minato was on the man. Knocking him to the ground, he straddled the man. The knees of Minato's pants were sunken into the wet dirt, sinking like quicksand. He pushed the man down and raised his fists, striking him in the face. "You dare say that to me?" He punched him again. "You dare say that to me?" He struck him over and over and over again. The man's teeth cut up Minato's hand as he struck them. Some of the teeth were even lodged in his knuckles. Kushina ran over and gripped his arm. "Minato, stop!" She held his hand back. The man, his mouth gushing blood, just looked up at him. "Your son had 10 times more conviction than you, was 10 times more honorable." He spat at Minato. Minato got up off the ground and rose to his feet. He turned and began to walk away. The man managed to sit up. "You killed him!" the man called out to Minato as he walked away. "Naruto's dead because of you, Lord Death." Having returned to the Hokage's residence, he went into his office and sat down. He didn't change his clothes or anything. Dripping wet, covered in mud, his black suit partially torn, he sat there slumped in his chair, looking out the window. Kushina came into the room with him. She bore in her hands a first aid kit. As she went over his knuckles, he pulled his hand away. "It's gonna get infected," she said. He didn't even turn to look at her. Good. She rose to her feet and sat the box down on the table. She just looked out the window. "That bastard doesn't know what he's talking about. I should have let you knock out all of his teeth." Minato hadn't blinked the entire time she'd been in the room. "I didn't strike him because he's a liar. I struck him because he was telling the truth." She looked over at him. That wasn't the truth." He scoffed. "If the devil himself walked into the room now and told me it was my fault, I would believe him." From behind, the door opened. Danzo stepped in. "What you've done, Minato. The village no longer has any faith in you. You need to step down. If you don't, we're going to have a coup on our hands." Minato didn't respond. Danzo stood there. "Say something, you fool. How do you plan to proceed?" Minato once more did not respond. Danzo turned to leave. "I expect your resignation by sunset. If I don't have it, I'll have you removed personally." He slammed the door behind him, Kushina standing there scowling. The nerve of that man. He would cannibalize his own mother if he thought it served him in any way. "I'm going to do it," Minato said. Kushina looked down. "You can't be serious. You're gonna let him pressure you into quitting?" Minato, for the first time since their conversation started, looked to her. He has the support of the village. He has control of the Anbu. He can do it, and he knows he can. Kushina shook her head. "The Uchiha. They won't allow it. Fugaku would stand with you. You defended the Uchiha when Danzo wanted to move them. They would be able to fight with you." Minato shook his head. That would lead to a civil war. Uchiha against the village. The Fourth Shinobi World War would break out as the other nations seized the opportunity. It would lead to a new warring states period, and I would go down as the man who single-handedly undid the hard work of 3 generations of Kage, returning the world to an era of endless bloodshed, strife, and death. He looked out the window. If I remained, the curse would be proved right. She turned to him and gripped him by his lapels. "Minato, there is no curse. It's all in your head. You think that fate is conspiring against you just because you're connected to the number 4? Everyone has been connected to the number 4 at least some point in their life." She turned his chair around. "Look out there. See here? That's Issei. Her child there. He's only 4 years old. Doesn't look cursed to me. See that man there? That's Hide. He's 44, not cursed. See those builders over there? The carpenters helping build that restaurant? See that boy among them? He's the 4th son of their group. He's been helping them for years. Does he look cursed?" Just as she said that, the boy turned around with his wooden plank, striking one of his brothers in the face by accident, causing him to fall into the scaffolding, bringing it down along with his brothers and father. Kushina saw this. That's just a stupid coincidence." He looked up at her. "Are you trying to convince me or yourself?" She stepped back and raised her hands. "I can't. I'm done. I am done, Minato. Look, I've been playing nice with you since you got back. I know the loss of Naruto broke you, but I'm sorry, Minato, but you've gotta suck it up. I'm tired of seeing this. I'm tired of seeing you sulk. I'm tired of seeing you give up. This is not the man I married. You're not the man I married." She turned to leave. "Let me know when you decide to be a man again instead of this emotional little baby." He struck the table and stood. "Shut up," he pointed at her. "This all happened because I decided to bring your sorry ass back. I did it because I loved you and I thought I needed help. But all you've done is play against me. You turned Naruto against me. If you hadn't walked in and told him like that, he wouldn't have run off and gotten himself killed. I didn't kill Naruto, you did." She had tears in her eyes, dripping down her cheeks. "Are you trying to convince me or yourself?" She stepped out of the room. He flipped the table over, threw his chair out the window, and stood there screaming. About 2 hours later, he decided to change his clothes. He was about to go to the Konoha Council and tender his resignation as the 4th Hokage. He stopped by his door. He knocked on it. "Ku? You there? Ku?" He opened the door and found it dark. He turned on the light and stepped in. A note was lying on the bed. He picked it up and read it. Dear Minato, I'm sorry to do this to you like this, but I can't face you anymore. Not like this. I don't recognize you anymore. You've lost your will to fight, and you've lost your determination to heal. I'm starting to think that when I died, you died too. I stopped you from doing the Reaper Death Seal because I knew you were throwing your life away. I wouldn't have bothered if I knew you were just going to throw it away regardless. You, right now, are in the position to make things right, and instead of deciding to fix your mistakes, you've decided to run away. You think you're going to get me to follow you like this? If you won't clean up your mess, I will. If you ever decide to be a man again, you know where to find me. With kindest regards, Kushina. He looked at the message. He crumpled it up and dropped it. To be honest, he couldn't say he was surprised. Maybe he had changed, but it was too late to go back now. He was out of office whether he wanted it or not, and if he didn't give in, he would drag the world down with him. He walked to the end of the hall where stood a door. He opened it and stepped in. Inside, sitting at a table, there were 3 people. Homura Mitokado, Koharu Utatane, and last and definitely least, Danzo Shimura. He sat there, still propped up against his cane. Everyone knew he didn't need it. Curse the old bastard for being so spry in his old age that he could use a cane as a statement piece. Those bandages may cover what he claimed were old wounds from the First Shinobi World War, but Minato could feel his chakra. He stood there and looked at the resignation in his hand. Danzo looked at him, his eyes squinted so hard that they appeared to be closed. I assume this is your resignation. Minato nodded, but as he looked at it, he noted something. I don't talk like this. Danzo looked up. Minato looked at the piece of paper. What do you mean you don't talk like this? It's your resignation. I don't think I'm doing wrong. Danzo scoffed. You've done nothing but bring shame upon the Leaf and its people. Why shouldn't you step down? Minato looked to Danzo and showed him the letter. At the very end, the letter said, Forgive me. I have done nothing but bring shame upon the Leaf and its people. For that, I must step down. The other council members looked at the letters and then back at Danzo. What is the meaning of this, Shimura? He shrugged. The meaning of what? I used the same words by coincidence. The point remains that Minato wrote the letter. I had nothing to do with it. Look at it and match the handwriting if you must. Minato is right-handed, and I can't even use my right hand. He motioned to it in the sling. Minato had begun to realize something when Kushina had stated he wasn't the man she married anymore. After reading that letter, it opened his eyes. He looked over his own resignation and realized he couldn't recognize himself anymore. Not because he had changed, but because the man he had been was not there. He looked back and began to notice the change. As soon as Hiruzen had died, things began to shift. He wasn't sure how, but he was being manipulated. What are you doing, Danzo? Danzo groaned. I'm doing nothing. Minato shook his head. No, I think you are. This? I don't know how you're doing this, but this is some subtle genjutsu. Kushina's right. I would never act like this. He shook his head. Minato, are you still trying to find blame? First your wife, now me. Who will you blame next? Minato's eyes sharpened a little. How did you know I blamed my wife? Danzo sighed. Suddenly, from the shadows came Anbu. Danzo, what is the meaning of this? Homura demanded. Danzo stood. You should have just tendered your resignation, you fool. Danzo pulled out 2 special kunai. Kunai like Minato used. He threw them into Homura and Koharu's throats. Minato was in shock. Danzo looked at the bodies and then turned to Minato. Oh, Minato, why would you do such a thing? Killing poor Homura and Koharu. Minato found himself surrounded by Anbu. They grabbed him by the arms and held him. Danzo looked at Minato. You always were sharp, but I didn't expect you to break through this. He unwrapped his eye to expose a Mangekyo Sharingan. Minato looked into it. Who did you steal that off of? Danzo scoffed. Steal? I did not steal a thing. This here was Konoha property. I took it off an untrustworthy Anbu agent. Minato looked at the old man. How long have you been manipulating me? How long have you been planting seeds of doubt in my mind? Danzo thought about it. Since Konoha was attacked by Orochimaru. No. Perhaps longer, the day you stood against me and stood with the Uchiha, choosing the same group that got your wife killed. I knew you could not be trusted, but I dared not make a move, not so long as Hiruzen was with you. When the old fool died, you were no longer under his protection, and I could do whatever I wanted. Convince you to free Orochimaru, perhaps for selfish reasons. That was me. That was the power of Konoha Tsukami. The village is not safe in the hands of someone so incompetent. I merely needed the village to see what I see, and you went along with it beautifully. And now you will be framed for killing the council. We'll have you killed right here and I will take over. Minato grinned. And what if I escape now that you've spilled your evil plan? Danzo smirked. Who will believe you, Lord Death? Minato looked at him. You're the curse. Danzo patted him on the back. The people who call you that do so because my root operatives spread the rumors, and I got you to believe just as easy as I got you to sign the resignation. There is no curse, Minato. The only curse is your own ignorance for allowing yourself to be so easily manipulated. And now, it's too late. You'll go down in history as a failure and the worst Hokage ever. And from that low, I'll pull the village back up. I will become the greatest Hokage to ever walk the village. Greater even than Lord Hashirama. Too bad you won't be around to see it. Danzo stepped out of the room with 2 root agents following him. The doors were closed behind him. Minato stood there, his arms gripped tightly. He saw more Anbu agents coming after him, 2 with tontos in their hands, ready to put them in his stomach. He looked over. Do you want to know why they call me the Yellow Flash? As they hold his arms, he raises his legs and plants them into the knees of the Anbu holding him, breaking free. As Danzo walked away from the scene, he smiled. All that's left is for Minato to fight back. He'll take this information to the Uchiha, the only clan he can count on. From there, I'll wipe out both him and the legacy of Madara in one fell swoop, he mused. And much like Danzo believed, Minato would escape. He would teleport out of the village and to his old home on the outskirts of the village. The destroyed home. It was the only place he knew Danzo would never send men to search for him. He took a breather and then sighed. Looks like you've been through the ringer, a voice said. He looked over. Kushina. He stood. She raised a brow with a half smile on her lips. Did you resign? He shook his head. No, I came to realize that it wasn't me. She began to show teeth as her smirk drew up into a grin. I knew my man would come around. He shook his head. No, in a literal sense, it wasn't me. He began to explain to her the plans of a secret coup that Danzo had created, and how he'd been using some strange genjutsu to control him the whole time. Kushina was appalled. Together they made their way to Fugaku's home. Kushina looked around. Not a single light was on anywhere. Did the Uchiha all go to sleep so early, she asked. It's late, Ku. I wouldn't be surprised if they all conked out by now. She looked around still. It's eerily silent. Something's going on. He knocked on the door. It opened to show Fugaku standing there. Despite how late it was, he was in full gear. Minato, step in. Minato was confused. He entered the abode. He sat down when bidden to by Fugaku. I would ask you what you're doing here, but I already know. Minato was shocked. You know about the coup? Fugaku finished his sentence. Yeah, I knew. Kushina and Minato looked at each other. She asked the obvious question. How did you know? Fugaku began to explain. Many of our Uchiha brethren are in the Anbu. Among those within the ranks were Shisui Uchiha and Itachi. Not too long ago, Shisui was attacked, his eyes stolen. He plunged himself into the Naka River not long after. Itachi carried a message to us though. A message telling us of what Shisui had found. Plans to remove you from office. Ever since, we've been gathering forces, strengthening our resolve. And more recently, I informed my youngest son of the matter at hand. Danzo does not realize that through his manipulation of you, Sasuke lost his best friend. Itachi has too. My sons have learned pain and it's made them stronger. And now that they know of the love of one brother to another, the fire in their eyes will never go out. Fugaku called them down. Itachi and Sasuke stood there. They displayed their Mangekyo Sharingan. Choku Tomoe, Fugaku said. The eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. This dojutsu has not been seen since the era of Madara Uchiha, and now, 2 have cropped up. But this time, instead of attempting to tear down the village, Madara will fight to hold it up. Minato was in awe, but he turned back. I don't know if we can win. Fugaku raised his brow. You doubt the power of the Uchiha? Minato shook his head. No, Danzo possesses a Mangekyo ability to cast a genjutsu that no one can escape. He could merely just cause you all to kill each other with it. Fugaku smirks victoriously. Danzo, despite what he wants you to think, does not know everything. And those few things he doesn't know will bite him in his wrinkly old ass. Fugaku also displayed a set of Mangekyo. I too possess the Mangekyo. I've kept it a secret for as long as I've had it. You will be the first person I reveal my ability to, Minato. Minato looked at the design within the eye and let Fugaku continue. In my left eye, I can cast a sort of anti-genjutsu. It's immune to all types of genjutsu, and to those who make eye contact with me within the span of 12 hours, they too will be immune. And with my right eye, I can bounce any genjutsu cast upon me, but 100 times stronger. Danzo cannot use Shisui's Sharingan to stop us. We're ready for him. The moment word came down that you had decided to resign, we began to prepare. My men await us at the Naka Shrine. He led Minato to the shrine where the Uchiha had gathered. It was there that Fugaku explained the situation. Minato currently was still the Hokage, which meant that he may be able to disrupt the chain of command. However, he told his clansmen not to count on this, as Danzo possessed the ability to convince anyone of anything, so they needed to be prepared for the fight. Their number one goal was to pacify the Anbu and find Danzo. To that end, Sasuke and Itachi together would spearhead. With their Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, they could utilize the Susanoo for far longer with less strain. Not to mention, they both possessed the ability to use the Eternal Flames of Amaterasu. This made them the heaviest hitters. Kushina also explained that she possessed the yin half of Kurama and was technically still a Jinchuriki. She mentioned that in the 12 years she had been sealed away, she and Kurama had nothing to do but talk, which had led the two to finally getting along fairly well, especially considering that the more violent and closed-minded half of them had apparently been given to Naruto. She said that she would also utilize Kurama to help them. With that, they began to march on Konoha, moving silently. It wasn't hard to find Danzo. He and his forces had gathered outside of the Hokage's residence. All for show, he began to officially charge Minato with murder and treason. Minato struck back by saying that Danzo had been manipulating everyone and killed the council personally. Essentially, it fell into a he said, she said type situation where the victor was the one who wrote the history books. And both men knew that. Despite Danzo's confidence, Minato remained confident too. The Anbu began to face off against the Uchiha, with Sasuke and Itachi both bringing their Susanoo to bear. To their surprise, Danzo had some cards of his own to play. He summoned a creature of darkness, a beast so terrifying that its name had been written down in legends. Or perhaps this beast was inspired by those legends. It appeared through a portal to face them, Nue. But it wasn't alone. Danzo had also cast a genjutsu over Yamato, who proceeded to utilize his wood release to form a wood golem. With Sasuke and Itachi bogged down by this new threat, Kushina felt it was best to utilize Kurama to help them. Having removed the seal ages ago, she let Kurama go and do his thing. But that was when Danzo cast his genjutsu. To Minato's surprise, the genjutsu worked and Kurama fell under the control of Danzo. How could this be? I thought you could protect us, Fugaku. Fugaku looked to Minato. I screwed up, Fugaku shouted. Anyone who makes eye contact with me is protected. I assumed that since Kushina made eye contact with me, the Nine Tails would also be protected. It seems that he was not counted since he didn't physically make eye contact with me. Now the Uchiha were being attacked by Nue, Yamato's wood golem, and even Kurama. Kushina was weakened but still going. There was no way that she could actually die from this, being an immortal Edo Tensei, but she was heavily weakened to the point that she could barely do anything. This left it up to Minato to tip the battle in their favor. So long as Danzo was in control of the Nine Tails, the Uchiha would be slaughtered. He needed to deal with this. And so he rushed up to the roof of the Hokage's residence where he faced off against the old man. Danzo stood there. Minato, by now you understand that there's no way you can win. Give up now and I promise I will not seal your wife away permanently. It would be a shame if you and Naruto never saw her again. In anger, Minato rushed forward with his Rasengan. Danzo was quick and agile for an old man. This was attributed to the Hashirama Senju cells he possessed in his arm. Speaking of which, he undid the seals on his arm, allowing the arm embedded with Sharingan to finally open. Minato felt his stomach churn with disgust. He wanted to puke, especially when one of those eyes turned to face him. Minato still held the Rasengan in his hand though. He suddenly teleported behind Danzo, using a kunai he had dropped before his first attack as a marker. Danzo was sent flying. Minato smiled. But slowly, one of the eyes on Danzo's arm closed, and he was behind Minato now. Minato felt a sharp pain as a wind-style blade was pushed through him from behind. Danzo pulled it out as Minato fell to his knees. Kushina rushed to him as blood poured from his wounds. She held him in her arms. No, please, no, don't. Just hold on, Minato. Suddenly, from behind, Fugaku appeared on the roof and challenged Danzo before he could strike further. Danzo and Fugaku clashed as Kushina held her husband in her arms. He looked up at her. Maybe we can all be a family again. He smiled and slowly his eyes began to close. Everything was dark. No, there was a light. He opened his eyes to find himself sitting before a fire, a book on his face. The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Ninja by Jiraiya, the title cover read. He pulled it off his face and looked around. Ah, a dream. He looked over and saw Naruto roasting marshmallows over a fire. Oh, hey Naruto, what are you up to? Naruto smiled. Making s'mores. Want one? Minato nodded and sat the book down. He rose and sat on the log next to his son. Minato enjoyed it. He had always loved camping out with his son. These few short moments he had with Naruto were treasures to him. The role of Hokage was time-consuming and oftentimes miserable. These were the few, brief moments in time that kept him going. Naruto had chocolate and marshmallow all over his face. He looked up. I miss you, Dad. Minato looked down. Why? I'm right here. Naruto shook his head. Not always. Minato nodded. Being a Hokage can be rough, but being the son of a Hokage must be even worse. Naruto smiled. It's not all that bad. I get to brag about you all the time. Minato smiled, his own face slightly littered with the ruins of a s'more. I'm sorry I can't be there for you more. Naruto sighed and smiled again. I understand, Dad. It's selfish of me to think of only myself when you have such an important job. I shouldn't try to keep you when you have work to do. Minato patted his head. I've got time. Naruto shook his head. You don't. Danzo's gonna kill Sasuke and Sasuke's dad, and he's gonna seal Mom up. You gotta go back. Minato began to tear up. I don't want to go back, he whispered, as if trying to fool his emotions into letting him slide without crying. Naruto hugged him. I was always so selfish, demanding you pay attention to me. I won't be like that anymore. The village needs you. Mom needs you. Go back. I love you. Minato smiled. I love you too. Naruto smiled as he faded away. Suddenly, Minato heard a roar and felt something pass through him. His wound began to heal. He sat up. Kushina was fighting Danzo now, with Fugaku looking down at him. You're alive! Minato stood. What happened? Fugaku pointed out as Sasuke and Itachi were holding back Kurama and Yamato. Kushina wanted to seal Kurama inside of you, but we couldn't break the contract Danzo had with him. So we had to find another beast to seal within you. Turns out Danzo hadn't cast Nue under his genjutsu. We sealed it up inside of you to give you a shot at using its abilities. Maybe they can help us. It was then that Minato realized. As his chakra swirled around with Nue's, he got a grasp on an instinctual level of what this thing was capable of and how far it could be pushed. Using his own experience, he honed the natural ability to push it further than it had ever been used before. Minato utilized Nue's wood release along with the natural chakra wells and experience he had to try the technique he had only read about in stories. Hokage style, 60-year-old technique, entering society with bliss-bringing hands. He touched the head of Kurama and saw it seemingly begin to go to sleep. Itachi managed to subdue it while Sasuke continued to fight Yamato. Without interruption, his Susanoo seemed to begin overtaking the wood golem. Together with this newfound power, Minato rushed back up to help Kushina. Minato, Fugaku, and Kushina all faced off against Danzo. He possessed the ability Izanagi, which allowed him to blur the lines between fantasy and reality, allowing him to survive fatal attacks. But as he would recover, he'd be struck again before he could attack. Eventually, this tired him out and he eventually ran out of Sharingan to use. This resulted in Danzo's demise. With Danzo's death, the hold he possessed over Root and the various others he'd been commanding was broken, and they found themselves surrendering to the Uchiha. Of course, this didn't quite clear Minato's name. He was still called Death's Hokage and accused of treason. However, Kakashi Hatake, a former member of Anbu, and the newly awakened Yamato could help prove his innocence. Not to mention that the cursed seals placed on the tongues of all those who worked for Root had been dissolved. Minato once again took his seat as Hokage. With the truth coming to light that Danzo was the one pulling the strings all along, Minato eventually found his approval ratings rising once more. Kushina by his side would hug him, her hand grasping his newly bandaged knuckles. Minato sat forward in his chair. Now, there's one last thing we have to do before I can finally retire. Let's catch the Akatsuki. Minato stood in the Hokage's office and looked out over the village. He looked down into a small picture frame he was holding. It was an image of his family. It showed him standing there by Kushina, and standing before them, grin as wide as could be, was Naruto. The image was only partially real. Each person within it was real, but the scenario wasn't. A part of him desired to know what it was like to have his wife and son together with him at all times. So many pictures were sorted through, and via the magic of technology, they had edited the images together into a convincing family photo. While the scenario in which the image took place was fabricated, it was as real as anything else to Minato. As if all these pictures were specifically taken at different times before crossing the fourth dimension just to unify in one single moment. Love's radiance traveling the untouched chronological frontier just to bring comfort and peace to Minato. Of course, this really was nothing more than Photoshop, but it meant so much more to him. His thumb ran across the frame as he smiled. Kushina walked in. How are you feeling? She asked him. Pretty good. A little frustrated though. We haven't learned anything about the Akatsuki. It's maddening. They know how to cover their tracks well. I have Jiraiya on the case. He's coordinating with the Anbu to at least put together a member list. Besides the man with the swirling mask, we've got nothing. She sighed. You've been at this for a while. Perhaps you should take a break for a bit and let the intelligence team do its thing. Minato smiled. I would certainly love to, but I have things that need to be made right. I need to get justice for you and Naruto. She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist as she laid her chin on his shoulder. She sighed with relief, as if this were the only rest she could have as an Ito Tensei. He leaned his head over against hers, just enjoying the embrace. He smiled with a touch of melancholy, knowing that one day that touch would go away again. He wouldn't lie. Some nights, as she attempted to sleep despite not needing it, he would watch her as the night rolled on, and he would feel the tears escape his eyes as their hands clasped, knowing that he would one day lose that touch. But he knew that she would go on to Naruto, and that the two would be happy, and would wait for him. Perhaps that really nullified any form of fear in his heart. Fear of death. Not to say that he was suicidal, he just knew that better things were to come, so why fear? He would live every day as if it were his last, because he wasn't afraid for it to be. She gripped the picture frame with her hands as she looked down over his shoulders. What a beautiful picture. He smiled and sat it down. It's not as beautiful as you, he said, turning around to face her. Their lips touched and gave form to the passionate fires burning within both of their hearts. But this moment was quickly ruined when a man rushed in. Lord Fourth! He stopped and blushed, seeing the Hokage kiss his wife. The Anbu ninja took a step back before going down to one knee and bowing in respect for his superior. Pardon, Lord Hokage, but I have important news. Minato turned to look. What is it? The Anbu agent looked up. The fourth Kazekage, Gaara, has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki. We received word from the administration there. They're requesting help. Minato thought back on it. Gaara was a true firebrand during the Chunin exams, ruthless and uncaring. To think that he now would rule as Kazekage. Minato would have assumed that Gaara would have driven Suna into the ground, and perhaps he had, and nobody there was willing to admit it. After all, why else would the prideful shinobi of the sand beg for help from their greatest rival of all? Minato nodded. Thank you for the update. The Anbu agent saluted and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Minato turned to Kushina. I suppose we should get a move on. We need to rescue Gaara. It will certainly help our standing with Suna, but further, it will allow us to learn more of the Akatsuki. Kushina nodded. I'll grab my gear. He turned and left to coordinate with his team. He needed to put together a special squad, so that's exactly what he did. He would invite both Kakashi Hatake and Might Guy onto his team. He would further call upon Itachi Uchiha, whose Choku Tomoe Sharingan would prove invaluable. Behind him, Kushina would walk in wearing a flak jacket of her own. She would walk up and join the briefing. Once this was accomplished, they would set off for the village. They'd pass through the land of rivers before passing into the land of wind. They'd make their way to Sunagakure by passing over the dunes. Their trek brought them to Suna, where they stepped in. The villagers all eyed them strangely, as if to say they were unwelcome, but none of them seemed to receive the stares of death worse than Kakashi. It seems your father, Sakamo, has left a big impression on the people, Minato said as they went a little deeper. They would eventually find Temari. She was standing there, watching the doctors attempt to heal Kankuro, who had been poisoned. He cried out in agony as they worked. Minato stepped up to her. Is he okay? What happened? Temari would look up to Minato. He fought to defend Gaara, but he was poisoned by another puppet master, a master of the Akatsuki. The doctors don't know what to make of it. Without a sample of the poison, it becomes impossible for us to treat him. Minato looked on. He then turned to face Temari again. Well, we're here to rescue Gaara. It should be possible for us to get a sample of the poison and bring it back here to you. All we need is a location, and we'll be on our way. Time is of the essence. She nodded. She pulled out a map and marked the location where their spies had tracked the Akatsuki and Gaara. Furthermore, she sent Chiyo. Minato would take it and be on his way. As they walked on through the desert wastelands, Minato looked at the map. What do you think they want with the Kazekage? Might Guy asks. Minato looks back. They want his tailed beast. They killed Kushina and Naruto by taking theirs. Might Guy seemed even more confused. But why are they collecting them all? One should be enough, especially if it's the Nine Tails. What do you think they want with the others? Minato shrugged. I don't know. It was then that a lone figure was seen standing before them. Minato looked up and noted the black cloak with red clouds on it. He was an Akatsuki member. The man smiled, his visage not too unlike that of a shark. Minato held his hand back to stop the others who just now noticed him. Minato called out, Who are you? The man offered a slight bow. I am Kisame Hoshigaki. It's a pleasure to meet you. Minato stood there silently for a moment, measuring his next words carefully. Where is Gaara? Kisame smiled. Just up ahead. He's with two compatriots of mine, but good luck getting to them. He unwrapped his blade. The blade growled and snarled, its teeth snapping at Minato and his team. Samehada, the sentient blade of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Might Guy would step forward. I'll take this guy. I've got a score to settle with the 7 ninja swordsmen. I want to prove my father right. Minato would nod. They'd rush off, leaving Might Guy alone against Kisame. Minato and his team rushed forward, racing toward the location on their map. Reaching a cave covered by a seal, they worked to undo it before stepping in. There, they would find Deidara and Sasori standing over the corpse of Gaara, his beast already taken. Minato would grip his kunai as Kushina would speak. His beast is already taken. Gaara is gone. But we still have a chance to stop the Akatsuki from claiming the beast. We just need to hurry. Minato nodded. They had no words to say, nothing to try to reason with the Akatsuki. They just raced forward. Minato targeted Sasori as he ran, identifying him as the puppet master that had poisoned Kankuro. Kushina stayed close to him as a Rasengan formed in Minato's hand. Minato would jump into the air and bring his Rasengan down onto the back of Sasori, shattering his back. However, this merely revealed that he was protected by a shell. Hiroko. From within, a rather youthful boy with red hair appeared. Despite what Chio had told them of Sasori, he seemed far too young to be the one before them. He stood up and summoned his puppets to defend himself. Minato would throw his kunai at Sasori, which the shinobi would defend himself from. It was then that Sasori was revealed to be a puppet himself, a person who had transformed himself into a puppet. He used his body's secret compartments and weapons to attack Minato with poisoned wires. Kushina got in the way and pushed them to the side. She used her ability to sense chakra and emotions to find out where there were organic parts. Unlike most creatures whose chakra radiated from a deep pool in their stomach, this puppet radiated out from a pool in its chest, from which emotions were also present. She assumed that this was his heart. She lunged for it with her claws out, but suddenly she was caught by the wiring from Sasori. Even the Ninetales isn't capable of defeating this many puppets, but I'm curious, how do you possess the Ninetales when Toby previously stripped it from the blonde child? As he spoke, Minato suddenly appeared before him. Sasori's eyes widened, wondering how he got between him and Kushina. Kushina still possessing the seal that kept Kurama inside, and within that seal was Minato's Flying Raijin formula, which he used to close the gap instantly. With one quick thrust, he shoved his kunai into Sasori's chest, piercing his heart. Sasori stumbled back and looked down at the blade, having passed through the only organic part of him remaining. He laughed a little. Such a simple end for the master of puppets. He fell to his knees. Chio came to him. It was then that she revealed him to be her grandson. Minato turned away and gave the two their privacy. He looked over and found that Itachi and Kakashi had captured Deidara, alive, but the body of Gaara remained, and the One Tail was nowhere to be found. Minato lamented their failed objective, but he harvested some of the poison Sasori had used against them and placed it into a vial. After Chio returned once more, she explained her part in Gaara's demise, the guilt she possessed in having been the one to turn him into a monster. She likened him to Sasori and made mention that she had failed to save 2 innocent children from becoming monsters. It was then that she decided to give Gaara another chance, to replace that which she had stolen from him. She believed that she had lived long enough and decided to use her own technique to bring him back to life, which worked but left her lifeless on the ground. Gaara seemed confused. Minato would then lead him back to Suna after picking up Guy, whose battle had ended in an impasse, and he'd present Gaara to his worried sister and gave the poison he had harvested to the doctors, who could begin working on a cure to save the life of the slowly dying Kankuro. They'd be asked to stay for a celebratory dinner, but Minato would deny this, mentioning their prisoner that they needed to question as soon as possible. And so, the group returns to Konoha with Deidara. Deidara is immediately detained, and the special torture and interrogation unit of Konoha began their work. They try as much as they can to get him to talk, all while Kushina and Minato watch from the windows, but nothing they can think of works. The head interrogator, Ibiki Marino, seems stumped, believing it to be an impossible task. Kushina then asks for a chance to interrogate him. Ibiki lets her try, but doesn't believe it'll work. She steps in as Ibiki attempts to come up with some new persuasion technique. Minato would point to Kushina through the one-way mirror who's leaning over Deidara. She slowly goes to the man's ear and whispers. Suddenly, Deidara's smile disappears. Kushina continues to whisper horrors into his ear. She raises her upturned hand in front of his face to show him what she would do. Deidara's eyes go wide as his face goes pale. He begins speaking quickly and ferociously. Kushina stands and smiles, patting the puff on the back of Deidara's head before returning. Minato and Ibiki would look to her in shock as she then spoke. The Akatsuki are based out of Amagakure. It seems that their leader is a man named Pain, and that the swirly masked man isn't the leader. They have a statue that they're putting the tailed beasts into. They haven't put the Ninetales in yet because they're afraid it'll overload it, so they're waiting to get the others. Minato and Ibiki were stunned. She turned around and began to walk away. Minato followed her, heading to his office alongside her. "You amaze me," he said, closing the door behind him. Minato came to his desk and opened the drawer and pulled out a map. He marked it. Amagakure is right here. He circled it with a marker. It's halfway between Suna and Iwa. She looked it over. That place became one of the battlegrounds for the Second Shinobi World War, didn't it? Minato nodded. It's been a popular battlefield for a while. Its current leader is a man named Hanzo. This is becoming a national emergency. Konoha is no longer the only one involved. Suna was attacked. There are other tailed beasts out there to be taken. I can think of quite a few. We need to inform Kumogakure that their Jinchuriki are being targeted by the Akatsuki. I believe we should probably convene a summit to speak of this new threat. At the very least, we need Iwa and Suna on our side. I know Suna will be willing to help as they were the last to be attacked. Iwa's still a bit iffy though. Their current Tsuchikage is an ornery old man with a will as strong as steel, and a stubborn nature that would even make an ox blush. I need some spies to get into Ame. I need someone to scope it out. I need to know if Hanzo is aware of what's going on or if he's involved in any way. He could prove to be a valuable ally if he's willing to help us. I need you, Jiraiya, and Itachi to go in. I'll go get them together. Minato nodded. She would gather up Itachi and Jiraiya. She told them to ditch any unneeded gear, such as flak jackets and headbands. After all, they were going undercover. And so, they began to make their long trek across the Land of Fire, until eventually making their way to the endless deluge of the village hidden in the rain. They couldn't get in through the gate as it was specifically stated that Hanzo refused to let anyone come or go without direct permission. Kushina, Itachi, and Jiraiya then decided to enter another way. They climbed along the bottom of the bridge until they were close enough to find the sewage pipe leading out. As disgusting as it was, they used that to get in, coming up from a manhole cover. They entered the village. After quickly cleaning up, the three hit the town to see if they could find some more information. Itachi was integral to this process, as his Sharingan allowed him to invade the minds of others, and force them to tell him whatever he wanted to know, including any information on the Akatsuki or any information on anyone who would know. While Jiraiya and Itachi continued to investigate, Kushina decided to confront Hanzo personally. She found the residence where the leader of Ame was supposed to be, but instead of going in through the front, she decided to scale the building using her chakra and make her way to the top. The floor where Hanzo was located was strangely abandoned, void of any guards. She could easily make her way through there. Coming to the door, she stopped for a moment and opened it. Within was not Hanzo, but two people wearing the cloud-patterned coats. She considered fleeing, but another bearing the same coat closed the door behind her. She was caught. The one behind her bid her to come forward. She stepped closer. She looked behind her to see the man clearly. He had strange piercings on his face. The Akatsuki are truly gothic, aren't they? Never a smile, always the black robes, black piercings, and black nail polish. Why can't you be happy? The one sitting in the chair spoke. How can anyone be happy when they know only pain? Kushina looked at him. No way, you really are gothic. The world's being threatened by a bunch of edgelords. The man didn't seem amused, but then again, that was never the point. So where's Hanzo of the lizard guts or whatever? I kinda need to talk to him about a group of very naughty children that have been taking things that aren't theirs. The orange-haired man just blinked, remaining reserved and uncaring. Kushina couldn't help but wonder if he was trying to act like this to be cool, or if he really was as dark and tortured as he put himself off to be. The man spoke. Hanzo is dead, he said flatly. Kushina cocked her head. Oh? Since when? 3 years ago. Kushina thought about it. Hanzo had been dead for 3 years and none of the other villages had heard anything about it? Kushina sighed and put her hands in her pockets. Normally such an action would result in the other getting defensive, but this wasn't the case. Both beings knew that they were immortal, so there was no reason why either should bother attempting to stop the other. Kushina blew a dripping strand of hair from her face. It seems you were ready for me. The man sat there, his hand still holding up his head with his fist. I knew you were here the moment that you, the Uchiha, and Jiraiya walked in. Kushina seemed startled by that, but she quickly regained her composure. Nothing happens in Ame without you knowing, does it? Pain seemed to look her up and down. You seem rather intelligent when compared to the other spies the nations have sent, but at the same time you're reckless. It seems you possess an immortal body, which could explain it. She pretended to blush. I was waiting to see if you would notice, senpai. She took a deep breath and then exhaled. Why are you doing this? What's the goal? Power? Fame? Riches? Is this the cliché conquest of the world goal that every supervillain and their mother desires? Please enlighten me with the hour-long monologue you have prepared. The man said a single word. Peace. Kushina looked at him with confusion. What? The man spoke. My dream is to bring peace to this world, to save lives from the terror of war. Kushina grit her teeth. Save lives, she said, faking a smile. Aren't you taking lives? A necessary cost, the man said. We take their lives to save others. He leaned forward. I can see that you have suffered a great pain as well. By my hands, no doubt. Your energy possesses a similar composition to the Ninetales in my possession. I assume you were close to the Jinchuriki we killed. Kushina attempted to hide her emotions. He was my son. Pain sat back in his chair. I see. You must hold an unbearable hatred for me in your heart. Smiling through a scowl, she spoke. I do. Pain sighed. This is what I'm using the beasts for. I want peace, but peace isn't a natural state we humans can maintain. I plan to teach them what true pain is. I want to ruin them on war. I want them to know what it is to feel pain. In that way, they'll renounce war altogether, and we'll finally have peace. Kushina shook her head. You truly are so ignorant. We're going to stop you, you know. Pain shook his head. Don't be so sure. It's not like you're capable of telling anyone else. Not so long as you're still in this village. And now that you know, none of you will be able to leave. My other paths of pain are currently ambushing your friends. Surrender now and maybe I'll spare their lives. She thought for a moment. Nope. She rushed at him, forming a tailed beast bomb in her hand. Suddenly, she was struck with an invisible force that sent her flying out the door. Pain tapped a button on his console and informed the guards of a rogue spy in the building. The alarms began to go off as Kushina rushed off. She made her way down the stairs. As she did, she heard Shinobi coming up and saw Shinobi coming down. She ran through the building. She would keep running. Having nowhere else to go, she threw a tailed beast ball into a window, shattering it and jumping out to run across the roof. As she ran, she would look over her shoulder to see the animal path coming up from behind her. She kept making her way off towards Jiraiya and Itachi, sensing them with the powers granted her by the Nine Tails. She would jump from rooftop to rooftop. She would see the form of a Susanoo rise against the skyline. She kept making her way towards it as the animal path would summon a centipede to come after her. The animal path looked down on her as its centipede began to give chase. Kushina eventually made it to Itachi and Jiraiya's location. There she helped them fight against the other four paths of pain until she held something into the air, a piece of paper, something Minato had given her. We need out now, she said. Having Itachi and Jiraiya grab onto her shoulder, she put the seal on the ground and activated it with her blood. This would initiate a reverse summoning jutsu that would teleport them back to the leaf, leaving the paths of pain behind to watch. The paths would look at each other for a moment before heading back to the Supreme Leader's residence. Kushina would rush into Minato's office and explain it all to him. Minato just sat there. Hanzo's dead? Jiraiya would lean against the doorframe. It surprised me too. Hanzo was an incredibly powerful ninja, but after facing these new enemies, I can understand. Minato nodded. Well, I've set up a summit, and I plan to go to it shortly. We'll discuss this with the other Kage. Kushina stood there. Let me go with you. Minato shook his head. You just got back from a mission. You need your rest. Kushina rolled her eyes. I'm undead, Minato. I don't need rest. Minato thought about it for a second and then relented. Alright, fine. Together they got ready for the meeting. They journeyed quite a ways to the Land of Iron where they would proceed to have a meeting with the other Kage. Curiously, the Raikage was absent. Minato would ask about this, and the other Kage had no answer for him. They decided to begin the summit without the Raikage, and as they spoke, Minato shared all the information that he had, coming to realize how many of the other nations had already lost their tailed beasts and refused to say anything about it. Was it foolish pride, refusing to inform others of their faults, or was it overconfidence in believing that they could handle it alone? Minato assumed it to be both. And so, as the debates continued, none of the other Kage would budge, each one wondering why they would need to work together at all. To them, the Akatsuki were a non-threat. Even if they managed to take their tailed beasts, what could a single group of 10 people do? Minato had an ally in this debate in the form of Gaara, who vouched for Minato's words, but even still, this was falling on deaf ears. But suddenly, a messenger appeared before them with urgent news. Kumogakure had been attacked and destroyed, their tailed beasts stolen. The entire room fell silent in awe. Kushina tugged on Minato's haori. That's 9. They have all the tailed beasts. Minato nodded. Do you now see the threat the Akatsuki pose? And with that, they have all 9 of the tailed beasts. Are you certain that you wouldn't like to join forces? The other Kage thought for a moment before nodding. We will accept this momentary alliance to deal with the threat of the Akatsuki, the Tsuchikage would say. It was then that they would hold a vote for who the leader of the allied shinobi forces should be. All Kage voted for themselves, all except for Gaara, who trusted Minato's judgment and voted for him. With that, Minato was the leader of the allied shinobi forces, his first decree being that they should get ready to attack Ame and take back what was lost. For the next couple days, they rallied their forces and began to march. They surrounded Ame and began to force themselves in. A massive battle began to take place. The 4 Kage and Kushina all led their forces against the well-fortified forces of Ame, which was being led by the 6 Paths of Pain. This wasn't as one-sided as you might think. The village of Ame was large and tightly packed, meaning that a small number of forces could be easily used to defend against a larger force. Besides that, Ame's shinobi were in their element. The only village that could really keep up with Ame was Kiri, and with the appearance of the Paths of Pain, the battle almost seemed to be taking a turn for the worse. All the while, in a secret base the Akatsuki used, Nagato and Konan stood before the Geto statue. With their great power, they managed to force the final tailed beast into the statue and it began to transform. Immediately after this, however, Konan goes up in flames, the biggest weakness of her paper bombs technique. Before Nagato had the chance to see what was happening, a blade passed through his chest. Toby stood there behind him. "Did you really think I would give you command of my dreams? That I wouldn't try to take it all back the moment you were of no further use? No. I don't care about your pain. I'm going to alleviate my own pain the way I want, and you can just die." He would then remove the left Rinnegan from Nagato's head and fit it into an empty eye socket in his own. He felt the power coursing through him. As the Ten Tails rose, he laughed as he used his Kamui to get to the upper levels. As Minato and Kushina fought the 6 Paths of Pain, they noticed that they bore a look of pain and confusion on their face before falling over dead. Minato was confused by this, but suddenly from the ground burst a massive creature, the Ten Tails. He saw it. The man with the swirly mask rose up and landed on the beast's head. He slowly removed his mask and dropped it to the ground. "No more disguises," he said, "and no more games." He turned to face Minato and Kushina. Minato thought his heart had stopped. He looked up at the man atop the Ten Tails and realized it immediately. "Obito." The man smiled. "Hello, Minato-sensei. Welcome to the end of the world, and the start of something new." Minato growled in anger, hurt by his betrayal. "How could you do this? I loved you. How could you do this to me, Obito?" Obito crossed his arms. "The boy you knew died a long time ago, Minato-sensei. I am what remains. I am all that's left. A shell filled with sorrow. The world took me, chewed me up, and spat me back out. If the world will reject me, then I'll reject the world and make a better one. You're free to join if you desire. I'll make a world just for you. A world where Kushina and Naruto are both alive." Minato began to run at him. Seeing the foolish Hokage racing to his own doom, Obito shook his head and began to seal the Ten Tails into himself. Once he had gained control of it, Obito sent a truth-seeking orb into the sky above and burst it, tearing apart the clouds and showing a bright blue sky, something Ame had not seen in a long time. Obito, now possessing 6 Paths chakra, declared him the new Sage of 6 Paths, and declared that he would be a god of destruction and a god of creation. After all, how could he create anything new if he did not first wipe away the old? With a swipe of his hand, the allied shinobi forces were knocked from their feet. Minato kept charging at him. Kushina stood there in awe. How could sweet little Obito become this monster? Within herself, Kurama spoke. "He will use the Ten Tails to destroy the world. He'll cast it under the infinite Tsukiyomi. He doesn't know what this means though. The world will be under Genjutsu, but it will end, as the Ten Tails is more than a weapon. It's a parasite designed to feed on all the chakra in the world, rendering it a dead planet. We must stop him." Kurama then mixed his chakra with Kushina's, allowing her to take on Kurama chakra mode. She would rush forward and race to Minato's side as Obito fired chakra rods at them. She told Minato what Kurama had told her, leaving Minato speechless. He looked back and began to continue running. They both raced up a building and jumped down from it to strike Obito from 2 different directions, but he sent them flying down. Minato hit the ground. Kushina entered her tailed beast mode while Minato used wood release to drag him down. He then summoned Nue from within to attack Obito, but it was knocked back when Obito made use of wood release to get himself free. Obito then summoned the god tree from within his body, which he then used to decimate the area with tailed beast bombs. Much of the allied shinobi forces, as well as the Ame forces, were destroyed by this single assault. Minato and Kushina would fight to not get blown away, with Kurama being the one keeping Kushina stable, and Nue being the one holding Minato. Minato would then hold out his Rasengan and enter Sage mode to boost his strength and would have Nue launch him. He would strike Obito, which would do damage. It was then that Minato realized that for some reason, Obito could not nullify Sage techniques like regular ninjutsu. This time, supplementing all of their attacks with Sage Chakra, which began to give them the upper hand. They would eventually come to the point where they could rip the Ten Tails out, but this was no easy feat. It became a battle of wills, and this battle was held within their minds. Minato and Kushina stood across from Obito in their subconscious. Minato looked around curiously for a moment before looking back at Obito. "Why did you do this, Obito? We all thought you were dead." Obito laughed a little. "I am dead, sensei. I died a long time ago. I began the process of dying when that rock crushed me. And where were you to save me? I was in agony. Whether I lived or died made no difference. I just didn't want to be alone." Minato stepped forward. "Obito, I didn't know you were still alive. If I'd known, I would have come back for you." Obito's smile began to turn to anger. "You didn't even check." Minato motioned to himself. "I couldn't. You were behind enemy lines. Don't lie, Minato. I've seen you obliterate entire armies all by yourself. You could have retrieved me. You didn't. And because you didn't, I was found by Madara, who imparted his designs upon me before he died. Minato was a little stunned. Madara? Obito continued. Madara was the one who found me and cared for me. He was the one who healed me. But what was even worse than that was the death of Rin. Where were you? Minato was speechless. Obito's anger got the better of him. Where were you? Minato looked down in shame. I was on another mission. Obito stood there. The day Rin died was the day I died too. When I needed you the most, you were never around. Why weren't you ever around? Too busy? Too busy for me, too busy for Naruto. That last thing struck a chord in Minato. I was always too busy. I was always so fast, known as the Yellow Flash, but for those who loved me most, I was never quick enough to save them. Obito shook his head in disgust. I hated you. You were the one I looked up to the most. I would have died for you. I did die for you, and you just let it happen and forgot me. Kushina stepped forward. He never forgot about you, Obito. He looked to her as she spoke. I saw him. I saw the real Minato, the one hidden from everyone. When he told me you died, he burst into tears. He blamed himself then as you blame him now, and when Rin died, he almost collapsed with guilt. I'll never forget what he told me when he heard it. I wasn't fast enough. He carried that with him for so long. Minato stepped forward. For so long, I wanted to apologize for being a crappy mentor, for being a horrible friend, for failing you on every possible level. I truly am sorry, Obito. What you are, what you've become, it's my fault. He stepped forward. I am so sorry. He hugged his former student. Obito was shocked by this. Minato sniffled. I wanted you to replace me one day. Obito was shocked. Me? What about Kakashi, the golden boy? Minato shook his head. Kakashi had skill, but he didn't have heart. Not like you. Kakashi's well-rounded now, but that's only because you made him so. I wanted you to be the 5th Hokage, Minato. I saw how hard you worked, how strong you were in body and mind. I knew you would one day surpass Kakashi, surpass me. I wanted to save you from the pain of loss, help you grow, but I wasn't strong enough or worthy of being your mentor. And when you cried out for me as you were being crushed, I wasn't fast enough. Kushina walked up. I was the one who delivered the news of Rin's death to her parents. I saw how they cried. It hurt. I lost my parents at a young age. I knew what it was to lose someone so close to you. I'm sorry. She hugged him. Why are you hugging me? He asked. Get off. I'm not the same person you knew. Don't you remember, Minato? I killed Kushina. I ripped the Nine Tails out of Naruto and killed him. Your son is dead because of me. Minato shook his head. No, Obito, I forgive you. Obito was confused. Forgive me? But I took away your reason to live. You should hate me. Minato squeezed tighter as a tear dripped from Obito's cheek. Hate me. Hate me, Minato-sensei. I'm a monster. A murderer. I've killed so many and plan to kill more. Just hate me. Minato instead held tighter to him. No, I forgive you. Suddenly, in reality, as Kushina and Minato stood there, gripping the tailed beasts they were trying to rip out of Obito, they looked to each other and then back to Obito and let go, letting the tailed beasts return to him. They all lowered to the ground. Obito was confused. Why? Why are you sparing me? I killed your son. Minato sighed. When Kushina died, people called me Death's Hokage. They called me Lord Death because I brought pain and suffering upon everyone I touched. But now I see that I truly had been. You and Rin were the first victims of my failures, but I don't want to be that way anymore. I won't fight you, Obito. I won't kill you. Minato took a kunai and put it into Obito's hands. If you hate me, then I don't blame you. If you need someone to blame for Rin's death, blame me, but don't hurt the world for my mistakes. He then opened his flak jacket to allow him to stab him. Obito gripped the blade tightly. Looking upon Minato, he saw Rin and her death playing over and over again in his mind. He raised the blade and screamed as he brought it down. Minato stood there, his eyes closed as this occurred, but all went silent. He opened his eyes to see Obito collapsed upon his chest. Sensei, I'm sorry. They came to their knees as Minato hugged Obito. I'm sorry. If only I had attempted to save you. I thought you were dead and didn't even dare to check. For that, I'm sorry. Kushina came down to his side and hugged him as well. Obito opened his eyes. I'm sorry. I want to make amends. I need to make amends. Obito closed his eyes and suddenly he utilized his abilities to revive all of those he'd killed during the war. But on top of that, a light surrounded Kushina as she found herself revived. She looked down at herself and then up at Minato. Minato smiled. You're alive. Suddenly, Minato felt a small set of arms wrap around him from behind. He turned to look. His eyes lit up as tears began to spill forth. Naruto! He turned around and held his son and cradled him in his arms. Is this a dream? Tell me this is a dream. Obito shook his head. No, I failed you, mentor. There's only one way for me to make amends now. Obito pulled a blade out and held it in front of his stomach. He was prepared to commit harakiri, but Kushina gripped his hand. No, if you wish to make amends, then you should do so while living. And with that, the Fourth Shinobi World War came to an end. Minato reported the end, stating that the Ten Tails and Pain had been destroyed, not telling anyone that the Ten Tails and its Jinchuriki had been taken in by Konoha. Minato pardoning Obito's actions with the stipulation that he use his power and his freedom to protect the world. That being said, Minato did decide to step down. The role of Hokage had just become too much to bear. Despite his young age, his hair was already turning white, and so he would sign a resignation. He would declare to the world alongside his family that he was stepping down. In his place, he chose Itachi to replace him. Itachi became the first Uchiha Hokage, and the pride of the Uchiha clan. Meanwhile, Minato and his family moved deeper into the village where they took up a house to spend the rest of their time together. The alarm clock went off. Minato tapped it to shut off the alarm. He would then roll over to see Kushina there. He would kiss her nose to wake her up. Coo. Her eyes would open. Mean. He smiled at her. It's time to get up. She nodded. Together they got up and started on breakfast. He sat there and sipped on his coffee as an orange blur rushed past. He looked up from his paper to see Naruto, sandwich stuffed into his mouth. I'm late. I'm off to report to Kakashi-sensei. Minato giggled. He's so quick, but somehow he's never on time. Kushina looked back at him. Huh, I wonder where he gets it from. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Minato stood and answered. What did you forget this time, Naruto? He retracted that question when he saw Jiraiya. Oh, hey Jiraiya. Jiraiya smiled. Hope I'm not intruding. I brought everything we would need. Kushina looked back. What are you going to do? Minato looked back and smiled. I'm going to write an autobiography with Jiraiya's help. Jiraiya smiled. Yeah, I think the future generations could stand to look back on the Fourth Hokage's hardships and learn something from it. I predict that it'll become a Land of Fire bestseller. Jiraiya came in. He sat down at the table with his paper. First of all, we're gonna need a title. Something to catch the reader's eye. Any ideas? Minato sat there and thought for a second before smiling. He looked at Jiraiya. What about Yondaime, when curses become blessings? Jiraiya smiled. Sounds appropriate. And so they began to write. Minato then reflected on the hardships that it had took him to get to this point, but he realized as he did that his life truly had been blessed. And because of the hardships he had to face, the world was now safe and at peace. The curse had been broken. Perhaps it had never been a curse in the first place. Without these things, the world would no longer be around. He took a sip of his coffee. Let's start with chapter 1. Quick, but never on time. And that's it, folks. That's the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought that this little experiment with Minato was quite the thrill ride. It had me laughing, had me crying some more. But above all, it was a fun story to follow. I hope you all liked it. Don't be shy to tell us what you would like to see in the future, too. I'm always eager to hear your ideas.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.